Chapter 21. Ant Cave. Interlude. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ant Cave, Interlude, Status, Name. Isaac L.V. Gender. Male. Year. First title. Freshman Mana. 605/605, Mana Recovery Speed, C. Stamina, C. Strength, C. Intelligence, C. Willpower, B+, Potential. Details. Combat Skills, Elemental Series 1. Ice, Elemental Firepower, C+, Elemental Efficiency, C+, Elemental Synergy, C+, Elemental Series 2, Locked, Own Skills, Active, 1, Ice Generation, C, /5, Black Ice, C. 2, Ice Curtain, C+, 1, Cold Divergence, C+, 1, Basic Protection Magic, E, 4, Frost Flame, D, 4, Ice Wall, D, Passive, 7, Psychological Insight Skill Tree. Details. Unique Attributes, Hunter. I gained 14 levels at once. In Magic Knight of M. Raken, your mana increased at a progressively faster rate once you hit level 50, and I had just reached that point. If I raised my level by just 1, my mana would start to rise significantly. It wouldn't be long before I learned Frost Explosion. I never thought it would be this easy. It was a sunny afternoon. I was in the corner of the garden as usual. I was sitting on the grass, staring down at the sheath of disaster in my right hand. I didn't want to waste any time, so I gently raised and maintained the frost fire in my left hand. As long as I kept the sheath engraved with a magic circle and infused with mana, I could use it once at any time. Then all I had to do was charge it and use it. I could engrave 5-star spells and below. However, the power of the spell would be the same as my current level. When the Hunter trait was activated, I would need to infuse more mana into it. I can't wait to try it out. I couldn't test the sheath of disaster right now. The moment I engrave a magic circle on it, the sheath would be assimilated by the magic. I wouldn't be able to replace it with a new magic circle. It would be most efficient to engrave Frost Explosion on the sheath of disaster. In other words, I would use this item only after I had acquired Frost Explosion. Not yet. I tucked the sheath of disaster into my pocket. Next, it was time to distribute my stat points. After I got up from my seat, I entered the status window, potential, stat points. 38. Growth rate, physical training efficiency, C. 26 out of 100, up, magic training efficiency, B+. 55 out of 100, up, learning efficiency, D. 12 out of 100, up. Elemental resistance, fire resistance, E. 0 out of 100, up, water resistance, D. 6 out of 100, up, ice resistance, C. 24/100, up, lightning element resistance, C. 29 out of 100, up, rock resistance, E. 2 out of 100, up, wind resistance, D. 13 out of 100, up, neutral magic resistance, D. 8 out of 100, up. Versus race combat power, versus human combat power, E. 4 out of 100, up, versus other races combat power, E. 1 out of 100, up, versus heavenly beings combat power, E. 0 out of 100, up, versus demon combat power, S. 100 out of 100, max. I had 38 stat points at this time and was close to maxing out my magic training efficiency. Regardless of Isaac's actual potential, a magic training efficiency of 100 was equivalent to a genius. My growth rate would be very fast. However, as the grade increased, the time it took to advance to the next grade increased dramatically. Even if I reach a magic training efficiency of 100, it would take me a long time to improve stats beyond B+. Otherwise, the hell difficulty of Magic Knight of M. Raken would be a breeze. To obtain Hilda's Frost Scythe, my ice elemental resistance must be at least 60, but that was something I could solve with time. I also wanted to get my physical training efficiency up. It goes without saying that the greater your physical ability, the more advantageous it would be in combat. If I was not as athletic as Ian, I might find myself in a difficult situation in the future. Besides, if I thought about my future work, good physical fitness was essential. It would also help me with wielding legendary weapons. Also, now that I had some stat points to spare, it would be better to improve my learning efficiency, too. The higher your learning efficiency was, the faster your individual magic proficiency would grow. It differs from magic training efficiency, which focuses on improving elemental combat abilities such as elemental firepower, elemental efficiency, and elemental synergy. It was a bonus that helped with studying. I've decided. Out of the remaining stat points, I invested 13 in physical training efficiency, 16 in magic training efficiency, and 9 in learning efficiency. Potential physical training efficiency has improved from grade C to grade B. Potential magic training efficiency has improved from grade B+ to grade A. Potential learning efficiency has improved from grade D to grade C. No matter how hopeless Isaac was, if he had this much potential, he wouldn't bow his head to anyone. Now it was back to training, and even more training. I let out a deep breath, then raised a frost fire in each hand. Grung. The mysterious monster that appeared during the class placement evaluation. Lou Seltania, the top seat of the magic department at M. Raken Academy, had repeatedly asked questions about the monster's identity. But she had little to no success. Besides, there was no way to figure out what elements each student possessed. Since the class assignment evaluation, Grung has completely disappeared. She searched Delphine Forest for traces of mana just in case, but there was no sign. If I had known this would happen, I would have paid more attention during the mana evaluation. In that case, she would have known what elemental constitution each student possessed. It was the first time she regretted not paying more attention to others. She was walking through the academy, basking in the sun with a troubled expression, when she heard the sound of ice magic being used from somewhere. It was similar to flames, but she could distinguish the subtle sound of ice crystals clashing together. It was definitely ice magic. The element that Grung used was also ice. Luce recalled Grung and headed toward the corner of the garden where the sound had come from. She walked past the tall flower beds and avenues of trees. Then an open lawn spread out before her. In the midst of it, she discovered a male student sweating profusely while practicing the 4-star ice magic, Frostfire. His silver hair was half-curled with a bluish tinge, and his eyes were blood-red with an icy gaze. Perhaps because he was focused on his training, his eyes were staring coldly into space. In both of his hands, a cold flame burned. The white cold and ice mana formed a flame, and beautiful ice crystals floated around it. Ha! The man exhaled heavily and released the frost fire. Luce knew who he was. Thanks to her photographic memory, she could recall him as clearly as if she were pulling out a photograph. The man who had panicked when he saw her during the class placement evaluation and then fled. He'd appeared from the direction Grung had escaped, that guy. And the ice element? I don't think so. For a brief moment, Luce doubted it, but she quickly shook her head. Grung was an overwhelming force. He wouldn't be training 4-star magic while sweating profusely all alone like that. Moreover, judging from the short range of frost fire, his proficiency seemed low. It was a long way away from him. The silver-blue-haired man's nose began to bleed the same color as his eyes. He let out a groan as he lowered his upper body in pain. It seemed he had overused his mana. Luz had never experienced it, but she knew that wizards sometimes overdid it and ended up like that. She heard that when they reached that state, their entire body reacted violently, making it extremely difficult to use magic. Despite this, he wiped his nosebleeds with his sleeve before conjuring cold flames in both hands once more. Once again. And then once more. The man let out a frost fire. Luz watched in silence. She didn't know why. On the day she signed a contract with the Thunderbird Gallia, the 10-year-old girl turned her gaze away from the human race in skepticism. But now, Luz couldn't take her eyes off the silver-blue-haired man. Was it because of Grung? Could it be that the monster awakened her curiosity toward others? Ha, ha, the man stopped his magic and caught his breath. He sat on the floor, lowered his head, and breathed once again. Was it over? No. He stood up once more and repeated, "Frost fire." One more time, one more time. When it became difficult to use magic, he did exercises like push-ups and squats to train himself physically. For some reason, she couldn't stop watching him. Luz watched the man in disbelief. Every day, the silver-blue-haired man went to the garden's corner to practice magic. Luz watched him, from the roof of Charles Hall, a dormitory for the top students. From up there, she could catch a glimpse of him training. On a moonlit night, Luz was resting her arms on the roof railing, her long rose-gold hair and one-piece nightgown fluttering in the breeze. She looked at the man with her hawk-like eyesight. The man mainly practiced basic ice magic such as cold divergence and ice generation, and he was also diligently using ice wall and frost fire. Whenever he had a chance, he would clasp his hands together and gather ice mana between them. Luz, who had basic knowledge of most elemental magic, could easily figure out the reason. That man must have been thinking of learning the 5-star spell, Frost Explosion. You're working hard. The night wind scattered the words that came out of her mouth. Not knowing what he was thinking, Luz simply watched the man in silence. No, on second thought, she could understand. Lightning elemental magic. Luz turned her back on that element. She always poured lightning elemental mana into Thunderbird Gallia, her 8-star familiar. Even at this very moment. As a result, no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't properly use lightning magic. That was why she had lived by solely relying on water magic. She lowered her gaze to her right hand. With a crackle, electricity flowed through her palms. Lightning generation, lightning element, 1, hard work, hard work, hard work. What is hard work? As if in a shape decomposition, the two words effort broke into pieces and began to run through Luz's mind. Luz clenched her electrified hands into fists and let out a ragged breath. Her chest was throbbing. The image of a silver-blue-haired man practicing magic even while in pain. It was a stark contrast to herself who kept running away from lightning magic. The next day, and the day after that. The silver-blue-haired man practiced magic in a corner of the garden. Even when his nose was bleeding and his body was exhausted, he continued to use magic. Perhaps he was driven by a sense of improvement, but he appeared to be compelled by some greater purpose. He seemed to have a secret that he could never give up. The more she watched, the more such thoughts crossed her mind. His visage of working hard was constantly stuck in her mind. A week later. Last night, it seemed like the silver-blue-haired man would soon be able to use Frost Explosion. Luz was sitting on a garden bench, watching the man from afar. He was still training his magic. He put both of his fingers together and created a gap between them, gathering his ice mana. Then, when a blue magic circle appeared in front of his gathered hands, his eyes widened. Luz involuntarily jerked her upper body forward. The appearance of the magic circle meant that the conditions to use the spell had been met. Now, was it going to happen now? The man held out his right arm forward. In front of his right hand was a round, condensed ball of ice mana. A light blue magic circle silently followed his hand. And then, the man unleashed the condensed ice mana. Frost explosion, ice element, 5, kaha. A powerful explosion of ice. In the blink of an eye, a spiky, stretched-out mass of ice appeared in front of him. It was an ice mass at least 10 meters long. Oh! Luce let out an exclamation, unable to understand why she was clenching her fists in excitement. Soon, surprise flashed across the silver-blue-haired man's face, which quickly turned into ecstasy. Ah! The man tightly closed his eyes, then clenched both of his hands into fists and trembled. Before long, he raised his head toward the sky and let out a beastly cheer. He even shadow-boxed the air in celebration. Pooh! Luce unknowingly covered her mouth with her slightly clenched fist and laughed. Chapter 22. Practical Training, 1, you are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Practical Training, 1, time for practical training. Since the grounds of M. Riken Academy were unnecessarily large, there were some buildings that were overly spacious. This place, Callis Hall, was one of those buildings. Callis Hall was often used for practical training. I was at the training ground and paired up with 3 of my classmates from the magic department. I was in an empty room. On one side of the wall was the door we had come in through, and on the other side was a tunnel-like passage. In front of us, a messenger was flapping its wings at a blinding speed, like a fly or a hummingbird. The messenger was a round speaker the size of a man's fist. It was a magic tool owned by the Academy, imbued with audio transmission magic and magic that transmitted the scene being watched as a video. The cynical voice unique to Professor Fernando flowed through the messenger. You are divided into groups, which have been chosen at random. You will be fighting demonic illusions. Once you've defeated them all and arrived at the final destination, your performance evaluation will be over. If someone is judged to have suffered a fatal injury, that student will be eliminated. The Callis Hall alone could not accommodate all first-year students in the magic department. Therefore, other groups not assigned to Callis Hall would have to go to different areas for practical training. The main evaluation criterion for this practical training is how well you understand the characteristics and weaknesses of the demonic creatures you've learned about so far, as well as how you can use elemental magic in combat. Second, how well you cooperate is also factored into your behavioral score. It would be best to take this seriously. We'll start in 10 minutes. Make sure you are fully prepared. It was the start of Act 2, Chapter 3, Practical Training from Magic Knight of M. Riken. In this chapter, the protagonist, Ian Fairytale, became involved with Seal Karndas, a Class A student. She was one of the official heroines. Later on, she would play a key role in assisting Ian in obtaining the ultimate weapon of the light element, the luminous sword. She took a casual attitude toward the practical training, and due to her apathy, she didn't even care if other students got hurt by her magic. Because of her attitude, she ended up getting into an argument with Ian. Then, the building collapsed, Garzia the Hermit appeared, and, Act 2, Episode 4, Ant Legion, began. Ian and Seal joined forces to combat the Disaster Ant Legion, but Seal eventually decided to take on the Disaster Ant Legion alone. In the meantime, Ian made his way through the ants to the center of the building. There, he met and fought Garzia, the main focus of Act 2, Chapter 4. Of course, Act 2, Chapter 4 would be skipped because I already killed Garzia. In other words, this practical training would end peacefully. Maybe. This is a very unpleasant situation. As soon as Professor Fernando finished speaking, a beautiful girl spoke with a sigh, as if she had been waiting for him to finish. Her short light brown hair cascaded down to her shoulders in a wave. She wore a red rose hairpin in her hair, and the shawl draped over her shoulders was stunning. It had a golden border and a red background embroidered with roses. Her bright golden eyes were looking at me. Rose Red Rivera. She was a Class B student. Rose Red Rivera, LV. Race. Human elements. Fire danger. Psychology. Feels contempt for you. A vulgar grade E is in our team. The lowest of the low, aren't you? She said with a confident tone as she looked down on me with a mocking expression on her face. I was used to it now. Just as I was about to ignore her, she stuck her head in my direction. Ooh, she smells good. She must be wearing expensive perfume. Even a worm that crawls on the ground has a role to play. I'll instruct you on the role that suits you, so please don't get in the way. Why are you so eager to start a fight? I don't understand, really. The two remaining male students were unable to speak in the frightening atmosphere. Certainly, Rose had the ability to quickly make people nervous. Ugh. In Magic Knight of M. Raken, her role was insignificant. If I had to say it, she was an extra, not even a supporting character. She was only there for a short time, but she let it get to her head before being robbed of her arrogance by Ian. You and I are the same, bitch. All right, the practical training starts now. Everyone enters. In the heavy atmosphere, 10 minutes had passed. Professor Fernando's voice rang from the messenger. Let's go. Our group began to walk down the tunnel-like passageway. The tunnel was dark, but it wasn't long before we reached the end. There were 5 demonic creatures, the Black Wolf, roaming around in the narrow arena. It was a demonic illusion created with an illusion materializer magic tool. There was some static in their appearance, but it was difficult to tell unless you looked closely. The status window did not appear. It was clearly an illusion. We stood at the end of the tunnel and watched the Black Wolves. Because the moment we stepped out of this tunnel, a fight would break out. They have a habit of fighting in groups. So, Mr. Allen and Mr. Ethan, I need you to trap them with rock magic and ice magic. I'll end it all at once with flame magic. Rose naturally acted as the leader. She seemed to believe that since she was in the highest class among us, she should be the leader. I had no objections to her selection as a leader. The only problem was that I wasn't a part of her plan. Well, since it was about Black Wolves, I guess they don't need a Class D bastard with grade E mana, though I wasn't really a grade E anymore. Our group stepped out of the tunnel, and the wolf demonic creatures stopped and immediately started to keep us in check. The Black Wolves snarled, baring their teeth as the male students used their magic against them. D. Rock wall, rock element, for ice wall, ice element, for crude walls of rock and ice rose from the ground, trapping the wolves while Rose hurled flames with both hands at the monsters. Fireball, fire element, 3, crackle. Quah! A roaring red ball of fireball struck the wolf demons trapped by the rock wall and ice wall. It was a fairly skilled fireball. The wolf demons were scorched and scattered all over the ground, and then, with a whimper, they disappeared. The Black Wolf illusion was casually repelled. Alright, let's keep going. We followed Rose's instructions and moved to the next passage. Demonic creatures emerged one after the other, and Rose killed them all. I want to get good grades too. Oh, that's the last one. Easy, easy. Finally, we had reached the final stage. Rose and the male students were conversing quietly. The male students seemed to be in a good mood since they were performing well thanks to Rose. Judging by the fact that she didn't give me any instructions, even after reaching the final stage, it was clear she had no intention of using me. After passing through the passageway, we came to a large room with a marble floor. In the middle of the stage, the final boss stood guard. It was an illusion of Toro, a giant bull-like demon creature who appeared to be humanoid. It was at least 4 meters tall and held a large spear in its right hand. Now I really had to play an active role. This wasn't the time to pander to Rose. So, when I raised my right hand to create a frost fire, Rose glared at me cynically. What are you doing? I'm trying to get some points. Collaboration is another criterion for evaluation, so wouldn't it be nice to work together? I answered in the kindest way possible with a capitalist smile on my face. Rose's eyes narrowed in disgust, as if she were looking at a bug. Gross. Ha. For a brief moment, I doubted my ears. You're a grade E, you don't even know the subject. Don't be disgusting. I am the leader here, and I want you to wait until I tell you what to do. Do you understand? Did I go too far? Mr. Allen, Mr. Ethan. Let's go. Rose and two male students walked out of the tunnel. I looked at her in disbelief for a moment before following them. Then. Roaring. Ah, fire. Fire generation, fire element, 1, flames suddenly engulfed me. It surrounded me in a circle, leaving no openings for me to escape through. Didn't I tell you not to interfere? Wow, that bitch. You're going way too far. What the hell am I dealing with? Only then did Toro, the humanoid demon resembling a bull, recognize our group. Rose, Allen, and Ethan took up a fighting stance. Mr. Allen, Mr. Ethan. Formation. Ha. Rose swallowed hard as she tried to give instructions. Hoo-hoo. Wah. Ah. Beep. In one swift motion, Toro leaped at Allen and Ethan and swung his spear. A loud horn rang from the bracelets of the two male students. The bracelets were glowing red. They had been eliminated. Alan Neville, Ethan Purcell. Eliminated. Cold sweat dripped down Rose's cheeks. She, like the two male students, would have been eliminated if she had gone one step further. Even from afar, it startled me. But Rose, who saw it right in front of her, would be absolutely terrified. The door to the elimination room creaked open. All movements must be stopped until the eliminated are all gone. Even the Toro illusion remained motionless in a spear-wielding stance. The losers walked towards the elimination door, a look of resentment on their faces. Now, the moment they stepped through, the door would be firmly closed, and Toro would start moving again. Why don't you? Rose turned to me. Her voice was trembling with urgency. Well, I'll give you a chance to perform. You wanted to fight, right? Be the bait. Meanwhile, I'll use my fire magic to defeat that demon. Rose said, placing a hand on her chest. Her voice was high and commanding like a young lady's, but trembling with fear. I recalled a conversation I had with the NPC Rose Red Rivera while playing Magic Knight of M. Riken. Her obsession with being the best of the best haunted her. It was a mindset instilled in her by the Red Rivera family through their rigorous training. However, hard work alone was not enough to beat the talented students of M. Riken Academy. The fact that she was in Class B rather than Class A, which was the best, must have ripped her heart out. She was even ranked at the bottom of Class B. She couldn't help but feel impatient because she believed that she always gave her best effort. This, of course, included this practical training. That was why she was trying to create an opening by using me as a sacrifice for Toro and then attacking. If she wanted to become the best at M. Riken Academy, she couldn't be eliminated here. And that way, she would look like she was doing her best. By the way, I think you should put out the fire first. She appeared to be in a hurry and wasn't thinking straight. Answer me. As the dropouts exited through the door, Rose screamed at the top of her lungs, her blood rising to her neck. What could be the answer? Do it yourself. Ugh. Toro roared, resuming the practical training. Rose's face became pensive. Just as Toro was about to swing his spear again, Rose quickly reached down and poured fire mana into it. A red magic circle materialized on the ground and a pillar of flame erupted from beneath Toro. Hua! Flame pillar, fire element, 4, Toro immediately leaped backward to avoid Rose's attack. Despite his large size, he showed nimble movements and superb athleticism. Ah, people who were good at magic were not always good at combat. Rose, for example, was not very good at fighting. Her entire body trembled at the sight of Toro, who refused to submit to her magic right away. From the sound of her sobbing, she was probably in the midst of some ongoing frustration. This was a stark reminder as to why she didn't make it to the top of the class ranking. Toro, who had gained some distance from the flame pillar, began to lunge at Rose again. This is the time. Rose's aggro was working well. Now was the time for me to make my move. Ice Generation, Ice Element, 1, just as Rose's mana control was disrupted and the surrounding flames started to dissipate, I created ice to cover the flames. Then I took off running towards Rose. On the other side, Toro was also charging toward her, just like me. But no matter how many fire spells she threw at him, Toro easily dodged it and closed the distance between them. Realizing that she had lost, she dropped to the ground in despair. She was about to give her throat to the charging Toro. Giving up already. Pathetic. Well, I guess it didn't matter. Rose was still quite a distance away. Even my front was obscured by her back, so the angle for attacks was not ideal. Team kills were out of the question. But it would be a waste not to take advantage of this useful situation where she was acting as bait. Luckily, I had a solution. I took out the dagger I had been holding. It was the dagger housed inside the sheath of disaster. Here I go. I fiercely threw the dagger at Toro with the sheath of disaster, drawing all the strength I had gained from the hell-like PT. Whirl. The dagger whirled around, cutting through the air without hesitation. It flew past Rose and reached Toro, who was charging at her. I could feel the mana circuits in my body connecting with the flying sheath of disaster. The moment Toro reached Rose and swung his spear, I felt the sensation intensify. Then, as if a trigger had been pulled, the magic circle engraved on the sheath of disaster glowed pale blue and activated, unleashing a flood of ice. Frost Explosion, Ice Element, 5, Qua. It happened in a flash. The ice crystals and cold air swirled in a chaotic manner, and the ice that surged from the sheath of my dagger devoured Toro. Before I knew it, a jagged block of ice had taken over the center of the battlefield. Soon, Toro's shape vanished without a trace inside the block of ice. At the same time, Rose's bracelet rang loudly. Rose Red Rivera eliminated. The messenger announced her elimination in a calm voice. Just before my sheath of disaster could activate its magic, Toro's spear struck her. Well, it didn't really matter, as I had no intention of saving her in the first place. Who would want to save someone who looked down on you? Rose's eyes were closed tightly and her head was bowed. She trembled and barely opened her eyes. Coincidentally, I had just picked up the sheath of disaster that had fallen in front of the ice block and was clutching it in my arms. What happened? Rose asked in confusion. I sighed, not wanting to see her appearance that was prone to despairing during battle. What are you doing? With my back to the large ice block, a white chill flowed around me. I said that so monotonously that Rose swallowed her breath and widened her eyes in disbelief. I unfroze the ice. Then, the large block of ice began to crack apart, turning into a blue powder that scattered into the air. Then I turned my back and started walking down the next passage to my final destination. Rose didn't stand up for a while. Her next destination was the elimination gate that had just opened up. Chapter 23. Practical Training, 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Practical Training, 2, Professor Fernando stood at the final destination. He looked at me with his usual cold blue eyes. His teaching assistant walked over and took the performance evaluation bracelet from me while muttering that, yes, he looked like a zombie, overworked and exhausted. Professor Fernando, who handled such an assistant, was like a necromancer. Group F, practical training is over. The results will be announced and feedback will be delivered in a week. Good work. Can I tell the people in my group about that? I asked, since they had all been eliminated. It doesn't matter. Anyway, I'll deliver it to them all at once before class starts tomorrow. Professor Fernando then told us that we could go home. Alan and Ethan, the first to fail, had already returned to their dorms. The manner in which the performance evaluation was conducted, as well as the specific assessments made, were strictly confidential. Hence, there was no need to worry about the student council president, Alice Carroll, discovering something suspicious like the sheath of disaster. The only thing made public were the grades. A week later, the results would be posted in the central hall of Orphan Hall. Can I expect a better grade this time? Even though I only got to perform once because of Rose, I still managed to defeat the final boss. Can't I have some expectations? Of course, now that I had enough gels and had tested the performance of the sheath of disaster, there was no need to actually dwell on the results of this performance evaluation. Still, it would be nice to get a good grade. I walked out of Callis Hall. The bright sunlight shining down was so dazzling that I momentarily shielded my eyes with my hand. My entire body felt unusually light. It reminded me of how I felt in high school when I went home early after midterm exams. But it wasn't time to play around. I had to begin training immediately. I'd barely begun walking outside Callis Hall when I was stopped by someone saying, "Wait a minute." It was a fierce, yet delicate, young lady's voice. How did you do it? It was Rose who asked me that. She stood in the shade of the building with her arms crossed while glaring at me. What? I knew what she meant, but I was deliberately pretending to be clueless. Snap. Rose took a step toward me, veins forming on her forehead. I don't understand how you, a grade E, can defeat Toro. Even if it was an illusion, I don't see how you could have defeated something so powerful. And besides, what the hell did you do? There's no way you, a grade E of class D, the lowest of the low, could have used 5-star magic already. Her voice was filled with tears, the way she tried to deny it was truly pitiful. It was probably her tendency to restore her self-esteem by putting others down. But her pride was crushed in front of the person she looked down upon the most. She must have been devastated that another person had so effortlessly jumped over a wall that she couldn't. Therefore, she tried to hide her own weakness by denying me. Otherwise, she would fall apart. I often saw people like her in Silim. Dong Silim, Dong is a statutory division of Gwanak District in Seoul, Korea. Korea National University is here, which is most likely what Isaac is referring to here. Those kids definitely couldn't pass the exam. You conceded to me 100 times, why didn't you save me when you had the means to defeat the enemy? Are you kidding me? But there was a very good lesson in this. What's the secret to being happy? It's to not argue with fools. Whatever. When I snapped at her with an icy glare, Rose's face blushed red, angry to the point of tears. I wonder if she was speechless because she was so angry and frustrated. Well, I was sure she was aware of how pitiful she sounded. Ugh. Rose gritted her teeth and stomped her foot. She didn't seem to have anything else to say, so I just started moving my feet again. You stay down there. I'll head to the top. A professor at the M.Riken Academy's magic department must be well versed in all theories of magic. Fernando Frost became a full-time professor at M.Riken Academy's magic department at the tender age of 25 based solely on his theoretical skills. Even at M.Riken Academy, which gathered the best talents from across the continent, he was regarded as an object of envy. He was gifted with a great intellect, an outstanding appearance, and the ability to give a lecture that resonated in your ears. As such, Fernando's near-perfect appearance was the result of his rigorous self-care and obsession. His appearance was immaculate. Sitting in a chair with his back straight and his posture upright. He mustn't look disheveled even when no one was looking. Every action he took must be dignified, as befitted an elite professor at an elite academy. Deep in the night. The rain was pounding against the windows. The sound of rain broke the silence of the night. Fernando was sitting in the office in Orphan Hall, a building in the magic department, reviewing the results of the practical training. Meanwhile, all kinds of documents were properly lined up in the air. Fernando had suspended them in midair with telekinesis magic. Knock. Hearing a knock on the door, Fernando raised his head. Ah, Marco. Come in. Marco, a male assistant with brown hair, stepped into the office. His soul-less face did not resemble that of a human. He walked over to where Fernando was sitting and handed him the papers. Marco grunted like a zombie as Fernando accepted the papers he had handed him. It was a document that summarized each student's practical training results, including grades and evaluation reviews. He had to review it to make sure there were no issues before sending it up the chain of command. Fernando skimmed through it, confirmed that there were no obvious problems, and nodded. Next, this one. When Fernando pointed to the stack of papers next to him, Marco let out a sob that closely resembled a scream. However, the assistant had no other choice. Marco, with both hands, picked up the stack of papers that were piled high enough to cover his upper body, and trudged out of the office. Today, too, he would need to stay up all night. Fernando flipped through the papers, reading them quickly with his telekinetic magic. In today's practical training, he was assigned with overseeing Callus Hall. He was using a crystal ball, just like the examiners, to monitor the progress of each group's performance evaluation through a messenger. In this practical training, his role was to guide the performance evaluation. To make sure that no problems occurred during the evaluation. If something went wrong, he had to fix it. And to remove the eliminated students from the field. Currently, he was evaluating the students after checking the videos of the practical training at each location. This time, the first years of the magic department could hardly be called the Jade generation, but as with every year, there were some diamonds in the rough. Top seat, Lou Celtania. Lou Celtania, the top seat of the magic department. Her mana capacity was overwhelming. Both her mana control and elemental firepower were impeccable. During the practical training, she used water magic to defeat the illusions of monsters with ease. However, her collaboration score with her teammates was 0 due to her lack of social skills. Even when her teammates were friendly with her, she remained cynical. You can't survive on the battlefield alone. Lou Celtania's weakness was her uncooperative, dogmatic attitude. And second seat, Kaya Estrian, a first-year student and the second seat of the magic department. She was the student with the second highest mana capacity after Lou Celtania. Her skills were also impeccable, but she was an unfortunate prodigy who was overshadowed by Lou Celtania. Seal Karndas needs to reflect. Seal Karndas, a top-ranking student in the magic department, had shown no remorse for hurting her teammates. She even got into a fight with Ian Fairytale, who was in the same group as her. Even if she has excellent magic skills, her divisive attitude reflected poorly on her collaboration score. Matteo Giordana is pretty good. Matteo Giordana, one of the top students in the magic department, was one of the topics of gossip among students. Contrary to rumors, he had a diligent side. Compared to Lou Celtania or Kaya Estrian, he was on the weak side. During his practical training, he used effective tactics while aiming for the weak points of the demonic creatures. In addition, he had the charisma to make his members follow him. He possessed the qualities of a leader. Tristan Humphrey has talent in magic, but he has a lot of problems. Tristan Humphrey was another outstanding first-year student in the magic department. While his elemental magic was powerful, he had a lot to work on. To begin with, it was a major issue to give up the task of analyzing the weaknesses of the demonic creatures while simply firing powerful magic. While the power of his magic was strong enough to defeat the demonic creature illusions, it deserved the worst score in the whether they fought while considering magic efficiency evaluation section. In addition, because of his family's prestige, he compelled the students to follow him. His collaboration score was also 0. In the midst of evaluating the students, Fernando stopped moving in the material for Group F of the practical training. This kid, if he had to choose the student who stood out the most today, it would definitely be a male student named Isaac from Class D. Silver hair with a hint of blue and blood. Red eyes. He was a student who came out with grade E during the mana measurement class and was clearly embedded into Fernando's memory. This student had used the 5-star spell, Frost Explosion, today. The skill level seemed low, but it was certain. It looked like he used a magic tool. Was there a magic tool that could engrave a 5-star magic circle? The world of magic tools was vast, so Fernando couldn't easily figure it out. However, common sense dictated that the existence of a magic tool capable of engraving a 5-star spell was an anomaly. In theory, there was no problem. As long as the number of mana circuits in the magic tool was extremely high and the durability was very good. However, that level must be extremely high in order to withstand 5-star magic. In other words, you couldn't get away with the structural issues of the tool. However, his main concern was the user of the magic tool. It was hard to put anything above 3-star magic into a magic tool. This was because the magic circuit itself was much more advanced than that of a 1-star or 2-star magic, and the amount of mana that needed to be stored was different. This meant that, even if a magic tool contained 3-star magic or higher, the user must be able to use the magic in order for the complex spell to be triggered. Otherwise, the trigger wouldn't activate. Exceptions belonged in the realm of the impossible and were unworthy of discussion. Perhaps the professors who acted as examiners were searching through the books right now to figure out the identity of the magic tool Isaac used. It would be difficult to ask directly, as contacting students about exam content was prohibited by the Marx Pact. Fernando was curious as well, but he was no exception to the ban. The mana evaluation was only 2 months ago. What are the odds that a student with grade E mana would be able to learn 5-star magic in just 2 months? Not impossible. However, it was extremely, terribly low. If he was originally a genius that lived without realizing that fact. Is it possible that he realized his genius only after entering the academy? It's not a novel or a play, could there be such a dramatic story? Fernando stroked his chin, pondering, then shook his head. There could be such a student. In fact, this student's performance scores had been steadily rising. There was also a record of him recently repaying all of his bank loans at once, including the interest at maturity, without waiting for the loan's scheduled deadline and without paying the accrued interest. He must have been working diligently. It could have been a case of him awakening to his magic talents. This was the prestigious M.Riken Academy, after all. It was a place where nothing was out of the ordinary, no matter how brilliant the student. Professor Fernando decided it would be better to give a positive review this time. He wrote an additional personal evaluation of Isaac's feedback. Isaac is a student who has shown exceptional growth. He tends to rely heavily on magic tools as an alternative to mana, but given the timing at which he uses it, he deserves a positive evaluation for his actual combat ability. However, as a first-year student, it seems necessary to refrain from using magic tools as much as possible and focus on developing the ability to effectively apply pure personal abilities. Students who demonstrated their potential were fascinating to watch. Aside from Isaac, Ian Fairytale, who was also evaluated as grade E in terms of mana, was also showing incredible growth these days. It's fun, watching the students you teach grow. That was Fernando's favorite aspect of his job as an academy professor. Footnotes. Chapter 24. Dorothy, 1, you are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Dorothy, 1, the morning sun was peeking through the curtains. Mary, the Austrian family's exclusive maid, woke up with a firm spirit. She got out of bed and folded the duvet neatly. After a light meal of a sandwich and hot coffee, she washed up and changed into her maid outfit, and neatly combed her long purple hair. The whole process was done like a machine. Her place was neat and tidy, and everything was well organized. She inspected herself in the full-length mirror, tying her finely combed hair into a ponytail while checking the fit of her clothes. Everything seemed fine. The 20-year-old maid tidied herself up and left the maids' quarters. In a room on the 4th floor of Charles Hall, the top-class dormitory of M.Riken Academy, there was a young lady she served. The young lady was always up on time. Her long green hair was disheveled as she sat on the bed, dozing off. Even when she was dozing off, she kept the duvet neatly folded, a habit she inherited from her father, Gerald Austrian, the head of the household. Mary served the young lady breakfast, which she ate blessedly well, for she was a voracious eater. When the young lady finished being bathed and was dressed in her school uniform, Mary trimmed her hair and sat her down at the dressing table to make her face even prettier. Then, with a black cloth, her light green hair was tied into 2 pigtails. Even today, Lady Kaya Austrian looked perfect. Mary was satisfied. Mary. Yes, my lady. But why? Kaya glanced up and down at her reflection in the mirror, and then a frown formed on her face. What is it? Your appearance looks perfect today too, doesn't it? Well, I'm feeling a little, I'll fix it. Kaya didn't really care about her appearance. It was only because she was from Duke Austrian's household that she had to dress up beautifully with the aid of a maid to protect her dignity. As such, Kaya had never once expressed dissatisfaction with Mary's work. In addition, Kaya's appearance, which was created by Mary's touch, had always been praised by many. Mary's skill at styling played a large part in her being selected as Kaya's exclusive maid, and ending up following her to M.Riken Academy. In other words, her ability to dress up Kaya in the prettiest way possible was something she took pride in. Nobody could ever take Mary's pride away from her. As such, Mary couldn't help but have doubts. Did she make a mistake without realizing it? No. She closely examined the young lady's reflection in the mirror, and found nothing wrong with her work. The 2-pronged hairstyle was perfectly symmetrical. The make-up was also perfectly suited to the innocent, yet elegant appearance of a student. As usual, a pretty lady was there. So, what's the issue? I mean, what did I overlook? I'm thinking of changing my style for once. What do you think? Yes. Making it a little more feminine. Lady Kaya said with her eyes raised, as if it were something she uttered after careful consideration. Mary wondered why the young lady had a sudden change of heart, and instinctively guessed the reason. Lady Kaya, may I ask why you want to change your style? I want to dress up a bit more. She was ashamed of herself that Lady Kaya wanted to embellish herself further. Mary sighed. She wanted to accept it as a simple desire to become prettier, but Lady Kaya's behavior had been far too suspicious as of late. She showed a dazed appearance as if she were an empty shell, or she would be lying in bed at bedtime, kicking the duvet out of the way saying, "Why did that happen?" and then. A recent suspicious memory flashed through Mary's mind. She went to her room to serve tea to Lady Kaya, only to find her silently looking out of the window. There was no response when she knocked on the door and asked to enter. Mary snuck over to the side and watched her. Lady Kaya was blushing with a blank expression on her face while staring at a silver-blue-haired man passing. Then, when Mary said that she had served her tea one more time, Lady Kaya's face flushed with surprise and embarrassment. Mary. The moment had come. It was obvious that Lady Kaya had a crush on the silver-blue-haired man. Since when? Maybe the last time she stayed out. That was the day Mary's life expectancy was cut short. She was so worried, she thought she was going to die. Fortunately, Lady Kaya came back safely, and said, "I have been protecting the peace of the academy." Even though Mary didn't understand what she meant, she assumed everything was fine since Lady Kaya said such things with a serious face. Lady Kaya's behavior only became strange after that. At that time, what if she had stayed out with a man overnight? Could it have been that blue-haired man? It's a mistake. She would not have done anything indecent. Because if she did, it would have been plainly obvious on the young lady's face. But the mere fact that she had stayed up all night with a man must have been a tremendous stimulus to Lady Kaya because of her vulnerability towards the opposite sex. Until she graduates from the academy, treat her as though she is a man. That was the order of the family head, Gerald Austrian. She could clearly imagine his enraged figure. Mary rubbed her forehead. Her head was already throbbing. "My lady, this appearance suits you the best." "Is that so?" "It can't be helped then." Kaya twirled her fingers through her ponytail with a flushed face. The surrounding atmosphere seemed to be indifferent to Mary's feelings of frustration and disappointment towards herself. House Austrian Code of Conduct. What is the third principle? Second daughter, Kaya Austrian. Respect your instructors. Respect your elders. Behave with respect to those who deserve it. Maintain your appearance. The family code of conduct was etched into Kaya Austrian's mind by Gerald Austrian. The real meaning behind the third principle was: train yourself to be a person who, in the future, can stand shoulder to shoulder with those you admire. However, Kaya realized that she hadn't been living up to the teachings properly. I want to look good for Sir Isaac. The only person that Kaya currently admired was Isaac. Did she present him with a neat demeanor and a decent appearance? No. Speaking on her demeanor, she only showed immaturity when they went to take down the ant demons. Every time she thought of the foolish side she showed to Isaac, she kicked the fuzzy duvet while thinking, why did I do that? Besides, what about her appearance? Wasn't she always wearing the same outfit? Even in front of the person she admired, she didn't look any different from her childhood self. Ugh, Kaya arrived at the Class A lecture hall for her morning class. Her mind was filled with thoughts about Isaac. But the fact that she hadn't seen him much lately made her heart sink. Whenever she looked at Isaac, he seemed to radiate an ethereal light, but she lacked the courage to approach that light. Even when he told her never to stalk, observe him again. If he had reached the realm of an arch-wizard, he would easily notice Kaya's approach. She couldn't afford to observe him. It was simply a matter of speaking to him normally. But after returning from defeating the ant demons, she became nervous when standing in front of him. It felt psychologically difficult. The House Austrian Code of Conduct, was it always this difficult to follow, father? She thought about changing her appearance at the very least, in an attempt to catch Isaac's eye. When Mary told her that her usual twin tails suited her best, she couldn't say anything. Kaya was never much of a beautician, even in her own mind. I want to see Isaac, she just had to go for it. What was so difficult about it? She knew the answer, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. Kaya wrapped her hands around her head and groaned. I've decided. Let's give Kaya a gift. She was extremely helpful when I went to kill Garzia the hermit. If I didn't give her something in return, my heart would be troubled. However, because she had a lot of gel and lacked financial constraints, monetary rewards were unlikely to appeal to her. Then, should I give her an item exclusive to the heroines? In Magic Knight of M. Raken, you could give a heroine a gift that she would like in order to increase her likability. The chocolate that I gave to Amy during the childhood friend kidnapping case was one of those gifts. Kaya was also one of the official heroines. I knew very well what types of gifts she would like. Among them, the best was by far the Armana wand. Among the heroine's endgame weapons, this was the only item that could be obtained from the secret shop. A wand made of the 8-star giant tree Armana, which guarded the great forest. It was the only wand among the magic Knight of M. Raken. Weapons that resonated with plant mana. In addition, it had a gemstone made by condensing Armana's mana. In other words, if she had it, she would be much more attuned with plant mana. The elemental firepower and elemental efficiency of the existing elemental magic would also noticeably improve. If Kaya had a great desire for improvement, she would jump up and down with happiness the moment she received it. It's so expensive, I walked out of the secret shop after buying the Armana wand. The Armana wand was very expensive. The price was a whopping 120,000 gels. That was why at the beginning of Magic Knight of M. Raken, it felt like a pipe dream. It's surprising that I still have money left over. Even after using 120,000 gels, I still had quite a bit of gel left. The academy provided all the textbooks and high-end writing supplies. I wouldn't have to worry about the cost of living as long as I didn't spend too much. I checked the Armana wand as I walked. On the outside, it appeared to be a piece of grayish-brown wood with a gemstone roughly inserted into it. But it would feel different in the hands of someone with excellent mana perception. I have to give it to Kaya later when the time is right. I went back to the dormitory, put the Armana wand in a box, and headed to the corner of the garden as usual. Now that I had finished my lessons for the day, it was time to focus on training. I arrived at a corner of the garden and took my seat. I feel like I'm going to level up today. I was filled with excitement. After some light stretching, I conjured up a frost fire in each hand. Level up. Your level has increased to 51. You have gained an additional 2 bonus stat points. Status, name. Isaac LV. Gender. Male year. First title. Freshman mana. 680/1000, mana recovery speed, C. Stamina, C+, strength, C+, intelligence, C. Willpower, B+, potential. Details. Combat skills, Elemental Series 1. Ice, Elemental Firepower, C+, Elemental Efficiency, B. Elemental Synergy, C+, Elemental Series 2, Locked, Own Skills, Active, 1, Ice Generation, B, /5, Black Ice, B. 2, Ice Curtain, C+, 1, Cold Divergence, B. 1, Basic Protection Magic, D, 4, Frostfire, D+, 4, Ice Wall, D+, 5, Frost Explosion, D, Passive, 7, Psychological Insight Skill Tree. Details. Unique attributes, Hunter. In the evening, the night sky was slowly driving away the glow of the sunset. In a corner of the garden, the grass was frozen around me. These were the traces of me using magic in order to increase the proficiency of Frost Explosion, Frostfire, and Ice Wall. I only used Frost Explosion once, since using it consumed a third of my total mana. But the increase in proficiency was proportional to the amount of mana consumed, so my proficiency would rise quickly even if I used it fewer times than other spells. I was in the middle of casting a spell when the leveling system window popped up in front of me. My level had increased by 1. That's great. I was overjoyed. I finally reached the mana power spike zone, level 51. My mana increased to 1000 in one fell swoop. My mana that was only rising gradually before, had now increased by half of my previous mana. Frost Explosion consumed 200 mana each time it was used. Thus, after using it 3 times, I would almost run out of mana, but now it was possible to use it 4 or 5 times. In addition, the increase in mana rose exponentially with each level, to the point where the expression exponential would be overshadowed. The Isaac coin is going to skyrocket, huh? While I was happily looking at the system window, a new system window suddenly appeared and overlapped it. You have acquired the passive skill, Demon Detection, through the effect of the unique trait, Hunter. Oh right. If I had the unique trait, Hunter, I would be granted a passive skill based on my level. By the time I got Hunter in the game, I was already at a high level, so I didn't realize that I had already acquired it. I opened the status window, went to the skill tree, and tapped on the neutral slot, which activated the passive skill, Demon Detection, a skill derived from the unique trait, Hunter. Demon Detection, 5, detects nearby demons and determines their identity. As you level up, the range at which you can detect demons increases. Type: Passive skill elements. Neutral acquisition conditions. LV51, possesses unique trait, Hunter. I knew where and how the demons would appear in the future. But I wasn't sure if they would behave the way I wanted them to. Meaning, demon detection would be useful at times. I invested the newly acquired 2 stat points in physical training efficiency. I had to train and study at the same time, and this routine required tremendous stamina. Perhaps it was because of my recent investment in physical training efficiency that I noticed an increase in stamina. Thanks to this, I felt that my overall training efficiency had increased. Besides, my magic training efficiency was grade A, so I could afford to do it. It would be better to invest in physical training efficiency as much as possible and aim to become Iron Man Isaac. Potential physical training efficiency has improved from grade B to grade B. Good. Now, there are only 3 events left that could be considered important until the end of the first semester of the first year. The duel, familiar summoning, and end of semester evaluations. The dueling chapter in Act 3, Scene 1 of Magic Knight of M. Raken was significant because it showed Ian Fairytale challenging Luce Eltania to a duel and fighting, revealing to the students that he had the light element constitution. There was no need for me to intervene, as there was no impending bad end. There was also nothing special about summoning a familiar. I guess you could say it was a good thing in terms of increasing my power, but there was no crisis. There was a reason why these crisis-free chapters would be repeated twice. It was because the last part of the first semester, the Thunderbird subjugation, was excruciatingly difficult. So far, thanks to the Hunter trait, I had been overwhelmingly destroying the demons, but I really needed to be prepared to die during the end of semester evaluation. It was because the Thunderbird Gallia is extremely powerful. In Magic Knight of M. Raken, the maximum level was 200 and the level of Thunderbird Gallia was 175. On the other hand, even with the Hunter trait activated, I would be level 151. The higher the level, the greater the gap a single level caused. In fact, it meant that it would be impossible to win against the Thunderbird. The best I could do was avoid him as much as possible. The villain of the Thunderbird subjugation part was Vera the Summoner. If I killed that bastard before being overwhelmed by the Thunderbird, the situation would be over. I have to train hard. Now was the time to focus on my training. Slapping my cheeks with both hands to drive away my worries, I put my fingers together and created a gap between my hands. Ice mana began to condense as it flowed through the gap. Light blue ice mana condensed into a dense mass. It flowed quietly, like the calm before a storm, and gathered in my hand, softly shining like moonlight. In order to use Frost Explosion with the body of an ordinary Isaac, it was necessary to spend time in this position. It took about 5 seconds to condense mana as quickly as possible and use Frost Explosion. If I wanted to increase the power, I needed to spend more time in the preparation process. Condensing to 15 seconds was the limit at my current level. After that, the mana stopped gathering and leaked into the surroundings. Then, in my mind, I engraved the magic circle for Frost Explosion. When the magic circle of Frost Explosion appeared in the air, it implied that the spell activation condition had been met. It appeared in front of my hand this time. The light blue mana that had condensed in front of my hand began to rotate slowly. It was a shape that seemed to gather the radiating cold air. I held it in my right hand and extended my right arm forward, aiming at the air. The magic circle of frost explosion followed the movement of my right hand. Now that I shot this. Wah! What was that? A scream. No, it seemed like laughter. My concentration shattered in surprise, and the condensed mana was dispelled. I raised my head. In the sunset sky, a female student was falling at a terrifying speed. A witch hat pressed tightly against her head, a shawl draped over her shoulders, and the hem of her skirt fluttering wildly. Her long, flowing hair was a light shade of purple, tied up at the very end. And a slight glimpse of her face full of laughter could be seen from under the hat. Kararara, a cluster of beautiful, vibrant starlight flowed out from the girl's toes, causing her fall to slow dramatically. She landed lightly in front of me. At the same time, the starlight that was seeping out disappeared. Ahahaha. Ah, that was fun. She, who had a pretty and cute appearance, smiled brightly as she let out a cheerful voice. Oh my God, for a brief moment, I wondered if I was mistaken. As long as I was transmigrated in Magic Knight of M. Raken, I was bound to see her someday. An opponent I hadn't expected to suddenly fall out of the sky. It was like running into a celebrity when you least expected it. She turned to face me, as if she had finally noticed my presence. With eyes that seemed to contain the universe, her star-shaped pupils captured my appearance. Dorothy Hartnova, LV. 180 Race. Human Elements. Wind, Rock, Starlight Danger. Psychology. Officially, everyone could only use 2 types of elements. The only exception was when you received the power of a fairy. Just like the girl standing right in front of me. She had made a contract with Stella, the star fairy, and used magic with an unusual element called starlight. It wasn't derived from the main elements, but it was an element in its own realm, so there is nothing to discuss. That was why she was called the Star Witch and was one of the most powerful forces in the academy. You're a first year. What were you doing here? She asked with a smile as she straightened her witch hat. It was Dorothy Hartnova, my favorite character. Chapter 25. Dorothy, 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Dorothy, 2, a magic talent that seemed to be blessed by the heavens. The depth of her power was said to be unfathomable. With a level of 180, she was overwhelming. Oh my, I never thought I would see Dorothy Hartnova in person. I couldn't help but be mesmerized by her beauty. Perhaps, because she was the character that I liked the most, it may have been that I was looking forward to seeing her. A small blue jewel brooch hung from the ribbon of her school uniform. The color blue represented second year. I was training, but what about senior? I struggled to maintain my composure, and when asked what I was doing here, I responded back with a question. Despite asking just now, I already had a guess as to why Dorothy fell from the sky. She must have descended from the sky while admiring nature's beauty. She did it here and there, but today she just happened to use the corner of the garden as a landing point. Me. You saw, didn't you? I was falling from the sky. Then why were you falling from the sky? I was watching the rain clouds gather. I left because there was nothing more to see, so I came down. Dorothy answered with a smile. When I'm up there, I can see the horizon. I love the line between the sunset sky and the sea. It's so romantic to watch the sun disappear beyond the horizon. In an excited voice, she started talking about things I wasn't even curious about. I especially enjoy the moment when rain clouds form. Should I call it aesthetically pleasing? So. I was flying around watching it when I said, I'm done now, and came down. Nihihai. Dorothy said innocently. Her starlight magic allowed her to manipulate natural world forces such as gravity, electromagnetism, and strong and weak forces, which allowed her to see the horizon as she levitated. It was on an entirely different level from simply floating with wind magic. So, what kind of training are you doing? Ice element. Why are you doing it here? Are you usually alone? What kind of magic are you using? How many stars can you use up to? BDNV. She walked up to me with quick steps and showered me with questions. Since she was pretending to be curious, I went along with it. In reality, there was no curiosity or interest in her questions. It was just an act to ease the other person's mind. Dorothy treated others in a friendly way, but despite how friendly she appeared to be, she never opened her heart to another person. She wore the mask of a smiling face and always drew an invisible boundary between herself and others. She was the exact opposite of Luce Eltania. While Luce was indifferent to others, if she opened her heart, she would open it up completely. This was because she didn't know how to maintain a proper distance. Whoa! Snap! Dorothy leaned her face close to mine. Startled, I reflexively jerked my head back. She was always smiling, always trying to make everyone like her. However, there were a lot of pretenses mixed into that smile. Beneath the witch's hat, her eyes, which appeared to hold the entire universe, were staring into my own. It was as if they were trying to penetrate my very soul. It wasn't an analogy. She really could see straight through my soul. My passive skill that could be used thanks to the abyssal ring, psychological insight. Dorothy could use a similar skill called emotional insight. Fear, affection, longing, love, friendship, and more. She could tell what emotions the person she was looking at was harboring towards her. In addition, she also had a unique trait called all in the world, which allowed her to see into the essence of living things, though the exact scope of this ability was not revealed in the game. It must have been to add a sense of mystery to Dorothy. Well, the ability to see into the essence of things came later in the game. It was relegated to a basic skill for high-level characters. Do you know me? As expected, she could see right through me. I wasn't sure how my state of mind was being reflected to her, but it wasn't looking good. I couldn't just answer, I know you because I played Magic Knight of M.Raken, so I decided to fake it a bit. Yes, because you are Senior Dorothy. Dorothy tilted her head as if I didn't give a very satisfactory answer. In hindsight, her reaction made sense. It would be strange if I didn't know Dorothy Hartnova from M.Raken Academy. There must have been a deeper meaning to her question. She was my favorite character. In other words, there was a high possibility that my feelings were seen as something like affection, which was a pretty big deal. In Dorothy's situation, it would be strange to see those emotions in someone she never met before. If so, what would be an appropriate answer? Maybe I should say something like this. It didn't take me long to come up with something I knew Dorothy would like. I'm a fan of Senior Dorothy. I said with a confident snort. Oh, really? Dorothy looked surprised. She was an attention seeker who loved to stand out. It was called celebrity syndrome. She liked to stand out from the crowd, and that was why she always used starlight magic unconditionally when standing in front of people. That's why I like her. Dorothy was a named character, but wasn't an official heroine. Even so, my favorite character in Magic Knight of M.Raken was definitely her. When I was living exhausted from studying for exams, I felt like a nobody with nothing special in this world. It was an empty everyday life. I would go to the study room at dawn when the sky was not yet bright, and when I left the study room, the stars embroidered in the night sky would welcome me. It was because of such an insignificant daily life and routine that Dorothy, a person who wanted to shine and reveal herself wherever she was, resonated so strongly with me. You don't know how much strength I've gotten from thinking about you. I see. A fan of mine. Dorothy stepped back, closed her eyes, and nodded as she cleared her throat. She looked embarrassed. That was a genuine reaction. I knew it because I'd seen it in the game. Thus, fans were the best being to disarm Dorothy. It was a situation where the person concerned could even read my feelings. There would be no doubt about the answer that I was her fan. If I have a fan in the first year, doesn't that mean I already have a fan club? Yes. Does that exist? No, wait, is it actually real? Ah, what the heck? Can I have a fan meeting? The time has finally come for my autograph to shine. Dorothy's thoughts quickly escalated, and excitedly counted on a fan meeting happening before it was even certain. Still, she was cute, so I just watched her in silence. It was as if my daughter, who hadn't even graduated from kindergarten yet, revealed her aspirations, saying, "I will become a celebrity when I grow up," and she seemed already worried about a fan meeting. How could that not be cute? Of course, I had never been married, so I didn't truly know the feelings of a parent, but I still felt that way anyways. Who's the president? For the first year, me. Is it already divided into grade years? I didn't know. In the first place, even if there was such a thing as a fan club, I was just trying to be nice. I had no clue about the other years, but I was pretty sure I was the #1 fan of Dorothy in the first year, Magic Knight of M.Raken. Yeah, I had a lot of experience. I mean, that autograph. I decided to get her autograph in order to follow Dorothy's rhythm. I took out a piece of parchment from the class materials I had brought to review and handed it to Dorothy. She giggled, took out a quill pen, and scribbled her autograph on the parchment. I got it back. It was just scribbles. Nihihai, nice to meet you. I'm happy that you're happy. Nice to meet you too. Look at the way you talk, it's so cute. Nyahaha. Dorothy smiled broadly. Just looking at her smile made me feel good. Oh right. I'm taking time away from your training, President. Ah, it's okay. That's right. Since you are my fan, just looking at my face will recharge your energy, right? I wish that would give me strength. Because otherwise, it seemed like I was going to fall behind in training. Just kidding, I have to go now. Train hard. Ah, yes. Dorothy turned to the side and started to walk away, waving her hand at me as she did so. Then, when her figure disappeared into the trees and out of sight, my expression melted. It was a nice sight. She was really nice and pretty. Why was Dorothy not an official heroine? That was my biggest complaint in Magic Knight of M.Raken. If Dorothy had a lover's ending, I would have spent 2/3 of my Magic Knight of M.Raken playing time on her route. Anyway, it was time to focus again. Regardless of the nice experience just now, it was time to get back on track and concentrate on training. Now that I had gotten a bit stronger, it would be better to go to the training ground for a while and work on increasing my elemental synergy as well. President. Dorothy's cheerful voice hit my ears. Turning my head in the direction of her voice, I saw Dorothy's peeking her head out from behind a tree. She still had a big smile on her face. What's your name? Ah, my name. It's Isaac. Yes, Isaac. See you again tomorrow. Yes, huh. See you again tomorrow. Just as I was about to ask why tomorrow, Dorothy waved her hand and walked away, her feet imbued with starlight mana. A cluster of colorful lights floated for a moment in her wake and then faded away. Tomorrow. What, all of a sudden? It felt like a nuance that said, you must see me tomorrow. Because I'm a fan. No wait, I am a fan, but... I pondered, trying to figure out what Dorothy meant. However, thinking that it was a waste of time, I decided to focus on my training again. If she really does come tomorrow, I'll have to ask tomorrow. Asterisk asterisk asterisk, that's interesting. It's the first time I've seen anything like this, the blue-haired man who had been training a while ago. He was hiding something sinister that even Dorothy Hartnova had never seen before. Her unique trait, all in the world, allowed her to see through the essence of everything under the heavens. Using this power, Dorothy saw the essence of the man named Isaac as soon as she saw him. Inside his essence was an enormous existence, capable of swallowing everything in the world. The unknown. It was an existence that could only be described with that expression, and its identity was completely unknown. It was something of immense size and looked terrifyingly ferocious, a mass of near-infinite mana that defied providence. Its countless eyes all stared at Dorothy in unison, each one giving her a strong sense of oppression. It made her feel as though she were an insignificant being. And then it spoke to her. It sounded like high frequency, but Dorothy could instinctively grasp the meaning of those words. It must have meant something like, "You are looking at me with your bare eyes, do you want to die?" For a brief moment, she was scared. It was fascinating that she felt fear simply because of something hidden in the essence of human nature. Moreover, the giant thing had been completely assimilated by Isaac. It belonged entirely to him. When it starts to rage, Isaac would be able to wield immense power. She didn't know how strong he would become, but it was probably beyond her imagination. In short, Isaac seemed like a mild-mannered student on the outside who was simply being sincere. But in reality, a monster. Dorothy's lips curled into a wry smile. She had heard rumors of the so-called geniuses among the first years, like Lou Seltania and Kaya Astrian. Looking back, they were definitely talented. Especially Lou Seltania, who seemed to have the potential to reach the top in no time. Even so, it was clear that if Isaac used his original power, they would not be able to withstand it, even if all of the first-year students, including the girls, attacked him. Besides, if Isaac could borrow that power at will, he could easily surpass even Dorothy herself, who was called a genius among geniuses. In conclusion, Isaac was not an easy opponent, even for the person called Dorothy. He was the person who might become the strongest in the academy. As expected of M.Raken Academy. This is why I like this place. There was a reason why it was called the most prestigious academy on the continent. With the power of all in the world, she thought that she had reached the point where she knew everything. There was nothing more to be interested in. But now, something new and mysterious had appeared. It was fun. Dorothy smiled brightly and walked across the academy ground with light steps, hopping like a rabbit while doing so. She decided to observe Isaac for the time being. It was the middle of the night. The sky was filled with rain clouds, making even the moonlight invisible. High above the ceiling of the tall Callus Hall, a demon clad in black was sitting on the railing, watching the surrounding landscape. His grayish-brown hair cascaded neatly down his back. His face showed a hint of mischief, and his physique was dwarfed. Strictly speaking, he was a human male, but his skin was a dull gray. A black flame curtain, made up of black flames, surrounded him. As soon as the raindrops hit the curtain, they evaporated and disappeared. The demon hummed a song as he swung his outstretched legs back and forth in front of the railing. He was scanning the surroundings with his two pairs of eyes, looking up and down on both sides. Earlier, he had come here to catch some fresh air after talking with Alice Carroll, the student council president of M.Raken Academy. When a unique sight caught the demon's eye. Far away, a man in a navy-blue tracksuit was running across the academy grounds, with ice curtain wrapped around his body. It would be understandable for someone from the night department to be running in such bad weather, but the tracksuit clearly belonged to the magic department. The demon studied the man. Thanks to his excellent eyesight, he could easily make out the man's features, no matter how far away he was. "Ah, he's that gray-E." The demon spoke in a low voice. Silver hair with a slightly bluish tint and crimson eyes. Thanks to the student council president, the demon had memorized everything after looking at the academy's student record and the results of mana evaluation, which was public information. He recognized the silver-blue-haired man who was running at once. The lowest rank that was rated as gray-E in terms of mana. It was Isaac, a commoner and the man who was said to be the weakest in the academy. "You're a fool, you're a fool. You're not at the bottom of the first grade for nothing. Try exercising in this weather for 100 days, 1,000 days, and see if your mana goes up or not. The demon giggled. Isaac looked pathetic. No wonder he had a miserable life at the bottom. He would be much better off at the training grounds, practicing his magic, instead of running around in the rain. Ah, I want to play with you. If I see something weak, I just want to crush it. The demon swayed his upper body from side to side and fell into agony. Should he harass that jogger or not? He gave up. After all, that guy was in the first year. Before the start of the dueling evaluation, he shouldn't disrupt the schedule by doing something so conspicuous. On the day of the PvP performance evaluation in the first year of the magic department, the demon planned to murder all the students. First he would imprison all the students with the 8-star magic, fictional hell, and play a large scale death game. Let's hold on until that day. Suppress your desire to torment and kill humans. So that when the planned day finally arrives, you'll feel even more exhilarated. Come quickly, that day. Suddenly, one day, he remembered the mission he had received from the evil god, Nephid. It was an instinctive feeling. Kill the Child of Light. The Child of Light was a man named Ian Fairytale right here at M.Riken Academy. The light element had a property that made demons fearful, so it was easy to distinguish. If possible, it would be better to deal with the demons and the troublemaker who were roaming around all at once. Ah, he was looking forward to it. The thought that he would be able to play with the Child of Light, that troublemaker, and the many students all with his own hands, before mercilessly killing them. The demon, Leafa the Elusive. That night was gradually drawing closer. Chapter 26. Dueling Application. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Dueling application. There was an anomaly in the familiar landscape. You don't have to worry about me. The sun was shining in the afternoon. Today we had the last class off, so I went to the corner of the garden earlier than usual to practice my magic. Suddenly, Dorothy Hartnova jumped out of the trees. She decided to lean against the tree behind me and watch me train. However, the fact that someone was watching me made it difficult for me to concentrate on my training. How can I not care? I wondered if she realized I was uncomfortable, as she began to read a book she got from who knows where. Even if she was reading a book, the mere fact that she was there made me uneasy. Senior, are you going to stay here forever? Yeah, because I'm bored. Why are you here? Because I'm bored. Then why did you ask to see me today? Because I'm bored. Dorothy gave a weak answer that didn't really explain anything at all, while reading the book. I wondered if she was going to keep answering that way, so I asked, "What are you having for dinner tonight?" and heard the normal answer of chicken. Anyway. As a junior and a fan, I couldn't say anything. Self-hypnosis. Let's ignore Dorothy. Even if she did come into view, I would just regard her as another piece of the landscape. Then it would work somehow. Phew. I took a deep breath while conjuring, frost fire, in both hands, and began to intently focus on my training again. 40 minutes later. The time when the sky was dyed by the color of the sunset. Ugh, blood flowed out from my nose. My whole body began to violently ache, and my magic output was becoming erratic. In addition, even the slightest use of magic triggered a strong rejection from within my body. It was now a daily routine. If I pushed myself a little harder at this point, I would get stronger. It was the same logic as strength training when you feel like you couldn't do it anymore, but then you did one more rep and your muscles would stretch. Today, as I mainly used spells with high mana consumption, it seemed that I had reached my limit earlier than usual. I wiped the blood from my nose and got into a preparatory stance to cast a spell. "Are you okay?" Dorothy, who suddenly came beside me, asked. Startled, I spun around to find her staring at me from up close. "Don't push yourself too hard. Won't you damage your mana circuit otherwise?" Dorothy smiled softly and began to wipe the bridge of my nose with her handkerchief. It was a kind and gentle touch. I was dumbfounded, so I just stood there and watched her in silence. Do you usually do this? Oh, yeah. I guess so, huh? When Dorothy finished wiping my nosebleed, she took the handkerchief back. The pink handkerchief was stained with red bloodstains. Then, suddenly, green manna began to flow from the side of my chest. It appeared to be coming from Dorothy's outstretched hand. Oh, what? Suddenly, I felt a surge of strength, and the stiffness in my body disappeared in an instant. A buff. I use just enough so that your body won't be overwhelmed tomorrow. Whoa, isn't this the best? I feel like I've just gotten a caffeine fix after studying and my mind was flashing. I could be a little more intense with my training today. You can't overdo it, President, okay? As if she could read my mind. Thank you, Senior. Hee, resume training. Slap. Dorothy laughed and slapped me hard on the back, then headed back to the tree that she was leaning against. Ah, that hurt a bit, but... Anyway, thanks to you, it was a big help. If Dorothy was around every time I trained, I wonder if it would be okay to get some more buffs. I wouldn't say anything overtly, but I thought it would be a good idea to ask for it when the opportunity arises. There was something out of place in the familiar landscape. Lou Sultania was watching the blue-haired man training in the corner of the garden. She was seated on a stone wall. It was quite the distance from the garden's corner, with trees obscuring the view. Nonetheless, she had no trouble keeping an eye on the man with blue hair. This area was sparsely populated, so she hadn't seen anyone come and go for a while. It was one of the best vantage points. The blue-haired man seemed to have improved his magic proficiency since the last time she saw him. It was a remarkable rate of growth. Every time she looked at him, she felt a strange stimulus. It made her want to work harder and harder herself, and maybe that was why she couldn't help being mesmerized by his hard work. He was the reason why she had recently become passionate about her lightning magic. But at some point, a woman appeared on the other side, a woman with light purple hair wearing a witch's hat. Upon closer inspection with her excellent eyesight, she was wearing a blue brooch on her academy uniform ribbon. She was a senior in the second year. The woman chatted affectionately with the blue-haired man, then leaned against a tree behind him and began to watch him practice from her special seat. Who is that person? Luz had never seen such a person before. Was she a friend of the blue-haired man? Or maybe his lover? She had no idea, but the women appeared to be interested in him, although Luz couldn't tell if the interest stemmed from friendship, a crush, or something entirely different. But the way she wiped his nose with a handkerchief was certainly unusual. For the man to have a lover was a matter of little concern. She just wondered if it would be impolite to observe. As she watched the scene quietly, memories from her childhood suddenly flashed in front of Luz's eyes. Gretel, look at this. Yap. It's cool, big brother. A poor family. The figure of a young older brother who wielded a wooden stick like a sword and the image of herself as a child, sitting against a tree and admiring him endlessly. Her former name, which she had already thrown away along with the past. Once again, her heart sank as she sifted through her memories. Luz gently closed her eyes. 1, 2, 3. Only 3 seconds. That was how long it took her to bury the memories she didn't want to recall deep in her heart, and to put her feelings under wraps. I will announce the contents of the next performance evaluation. The next morning, inside the Class D classroom. Professor Fernando stood at the podium and started making announcements to the students. The students were taken aback as this was the first time the contents of the performance evaluation were announced from the beginning, since it had never been revealed before. The time had come. It was something that must take place every semester. Duel. A 1.1 fight. We plan to evaluate your combat sense and practical skills in combat. Duel. As soon as they heard that, some students rejoiced and exclaimed, "The time has finally come," while others despised it. If I had to ask, I was happy. This duel evaluation would be a good indicator to judge how strong I had become. I'm confident. I was now able to use both offensive and defensive magic spells. I could even use the 5-star spell, Frost Explosion. My confidence soared. Comparing myself now with the time of the class placement evaluation. Ah, how amazing I am now. The ticket I just handed out is to apply for duel. Take 2 each. 2 small tickets floated next to Professor Fernando. They floated with the help of telekinesis magic. In my pocket were the 2 dueling application tickets that had been distributed earlier. You can use 1 ticket to challenge the opponent you want. If the other party accepts, the duel will proceed on the day of the performance evaluation. If the other party refuses, the spent dueling application right is returned to the person concerned, and that is the end. And that wasn't all. However, if you use 2 tickets to request a duel, the opponent must unconditionally accept it. To get a high score from the judges during the duel, it was best to demonstrate a variety of combat methods. Therefore, the dueling performance evaluation was structured in which it was advantageous to receive good grades as the number of duels you participated in increased. The only time a student would use up 2 tickets to request a duel was if they really wanted to fight a specific opponent. The Academy made the mandatory duel rule to respect the student's will. By the way, Ian Fairytale used both of his tickets to challenge Lou Sultania to a duel. His reasoning was that he wanted to fight the strongest person. In a good way, it showed his spirit and passion, and in a bad way, it showed his recklessness and bravado. Still, since he was the protagonist, it worked out. When I was playing Magic Knight of M. Rakan, it was one of those scenes that made me think, oh, if you're the main character, you have to have this level of ambition. Each person can engage in up to 4 duels. If you have a good opponent, it would be better to apply as soon as possible. This rule was implemented so there wouldn't be a backlog. Applying for a duel only needs to be done between first-year students of the Magic Department. Classes are irrelevant. However, if a high-ranking student wins a match against a low-ranking student, the score will be reduced by the difference in mana and grade. Conversely, if a lower-ranking student wins a match against a higher-ranking student, he or she will get a large number of points. Because of these rules, most people would only duel students in their own class. They would be too scared to pick a fight with a student in a higher class than themselves, and they don't get points for picking a fight with a student in a lower class. That was why it was unusual for Ian to request a duel with Luce. Once you've decided on an opponent, report to me. For now, I will leave this time slot empty. Move only within Orphan Hall. Do as you please, but focus on gathering your opponents. Over. The moment Professor Fernando finished making the announcement. Bang! The door slammed open, and the gazes of Professor Fernando and the Class D students turned toward the door in unison. A confident voice followed. Ha! This is the Class D. So this is what the air at the bottom feels like. Suddenly, the door burst open and the person who appeared was Tristan Humphrey, a conceited blonde aristocrat. Long time no see. I had been dying to do something with him since the class placement evaluation. Tristan Humphrey. He's from the upper classes, isn't he? Why would someone like that be here? Tristan was at the top of Class B. Maybe that was why all the students seemed intrigued and fearful at the same time. There you are. Tristan looked around at the students, then his eyes fixed on me. He charged toward me at a brisk pace. What the? I, a nobleman, challenge you, a lowly grade E commoner, to a duel. Bang! He slammed his hand on the desk in front of me and flashed me an arrogant smile. Be grateful. You bastard, were you waiting? What? Did you just ask for a duel with a grade E? There's no merit at all. How much do you hate him? When did you get on Tristan's bad side, dude? Of course he's going to refuse, right? How can a grade E beat him? Professor Fernando's eyes were filled with intrigue amidst the students' interest and whispers. Tristan smiled as he stared at me steadfastly. He seemed very happy at the thought of beating me up already. I wonder how frustrated I would have been if he managed to beat me up that time during the class placement evaluation. Still, I had to say that I was glad that he was trying to legitimately harass me through the curriculum. Wait a minute. Wait a minute, wait a minute. Lately, I think I've gotten a little cocky from hunting demons and fighting demonic creature illusions, but wasn't this a sign of trouble? Although Tristan was much weaker than the demons I fought so far, he was still much stronger than me. Tristan Humphrey, LV. Race. Human elements. Wind danger. Psychology. Delighted at the thought of beating you up. I wonder when he leveled up like this. He was probably level 71 last time. Of course, he wouldn't have stayed still after being beaten by me. Given his personality, he definitely put in significant effort to get stronger. He must have learned defensive magic as well. I'm in big trouble. I'll be damned. I won't take no for an answer. Ha 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 ha. Tristan laughed, taking out 2 tickets and throwing them at me. The thin sheets of paper brushed past my cheek and fell onto my lap. You're really trying to make me lose it, aren't you? Even if it means stepping on horse shit, I'm definitely going to beat the shit out of this guy. T/N Isaac referred to duel as PvP until now because of his background as a gamer, but the official term within the world is duel, which he began using last chapter. Chapter 27. Duel 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Duel 1. The duel evaluation will now commence. The day had finally arrived. Duke Hall, an arena dedicated to the first-year students in the magic department. The interior of the spacious building was divided into 4 equal sections, each of which contained its own arena. The first-year students of the magic department were divided into 4 groups and each moved into a different arena. I was in Group A. I recognized Luce, Ian, Mateo, and Tristan among the many students, but Kaya and Amy seemed to have gone to another group. Next to the arena, there was a judging stand with middle-aged wizards sitting side by side in their seats. They were all presiding judges. The rules are simple. You win when your opponent is unable to continue, or by forcing them to surrender. However, please note that surrender is not possible during the first minute of the duel. Due to the nature of this performance evaluation, no sudden actions are authorized. Be aware that you may be restrained by the proctors. In the arena, Professor Fernando, along with his zombie-like teaching assistant Marco, and an associate professor, were giving the students a briefing on the performance evaluation. The only time you are allowed to run amok is during the duel. We have the best medical staff and clerics are on standby, so focus on showing your full capabilities. That is all. Professor Fernando finished his brief explanation and walked out of the arena. Then, the associate professor called out the first rounds of students who were going to face off. Mateo Jordana and a student I had never seen before stepped into the arena, and when the referee called out, "Match start," the match began. Mateo Jordana, LV. Race. Human elements. Rock danger. Psychology. Wants to catch up to you. Mateo had grown considerably in my absence. Humph, he's been working hard to target me. I may be caught in the act sooner or later. What should I do about Tristan? Even though I promised myself that I would beat the shit out of Tristan no matter what, after he humiliated me, it was an undeniable fact that he outclassed me in terms of strength. Besides, I didn't even know how he honed his skills. The conflict between Ian Fairytale and Tristan Humphrey in Magic Night of M. Raken was during the familiar summoning. At that time, Ian lightly knocked down Tristan and refreshingly blasted him. After that, Tristan also began to learn defensive magic. But I had already provoked him during the class placement evaluation. It wouldn't be strange if he had properly learned defensive magic by now. Even if Tristan was a conceited person, I had to give him credit for his offensive magic. If he could defend as well as he attacked, I would be out of luck. So I had to defeat him with a single move. Otherwise, I would be defeated unconditionally. Ha! Professor Fernando whispered something to the assistant professor and then quickly stepped out into the hallway. His usual poker face seemed shaken. Well, it's probably nothing. I calmed down my anxiety that briefly rose. That was because nothing serious would happen in this dueling chapter, nothing that could be called a crisis anyway. Maybe he ate something wrong or needed to use the restroom in a hurry. Matteo Giordana wins. Matteo easily subdued his opponent with rock magic. After the duel, the judges gave their feedback. Most of them had things to say regarding Matteo's wits, things to praise, and things to work on, but one judge had some harsh words. It's pathetic. Your proficiency in rock magic is very low. Rock is an element that can be shaped at a moment's notice, which means you need to be able to sculpt rock forms with forethought and precision in combat. And yet, do you know anything other than violent battles? No wonder your skills are only at a Class B level. Must be because you're a commoner. Oh, that one. I knew who he was. A middle-aged man with red hair. An openly discriminatory professor. It was Professor Philip, who was in charge of Class A. Philip Meltron, LV. 108 race. Human elements. Fire, rock danger. Ext Noel.N psychology. Displeased because a commoner has defeated a noble. He was a professor with a notorious reputation, but his skills were certain. He treated nobles well, meaning there was little reason to dislike him if you were a noble. Matteo clenched his fists and trembled, then calmed down. Thank you for your feedback. Matteo bowed his head and calmly accepted Professor Philip's feedback. Contrary to how one would expect, his obedient demeanor seemed to have angered Professor Philip. Matteo was determined to prove his worth through his skills. He was confident that he would be as solid as a rock regardless of the challenges he would have to face, and Professor Philip's provocation wouldn't faze him. Next. Isaac from Class D, and Tristan Humphrey from Class B, come forward. It was my turn now. Phew. After taking a deep breath, I stepped up. When it was my turn, the stadium looked bigger than ever. Perhaps because of my nervousness, my heart was racing wildly. I slowly made my way up the stairs and into the arena. On the other side, Tristan Humphrey, the conceited blonde aristocrat, was grinning as he approached. We faced each other at a distance, with the referee in between us. It was then that the system window appeared in front of me. A demon has been detected nearby. Suddenly, I heard the sound of the wind in my head, and it felt as if my heart was being pulled upwards. I reflexively raised my head. Above the high ceilings, I could sense an intense energy from beyond. At the same time, information about the demon that was probably on the roof appeared before my eyes. Lifa the Elusive, LV. 130 race. Demon elements. Darkness, fire danger. Very high psychology. Wants to kill all students, including you. Was this part of Act 3, Chapter 1, Duel of Magic Knight of M. Raken? What's going on? The final boss of Magic Knight of M. Raken, Act 6, Chapter 3, Fictional Hell, Lifa the Elusive. He still had a long way to go before appearing. Why was he here already? Under the clear sky, the wind whipped through the rooftops of Duke Hall. Lifa the Elusive, a dwarf-sized demon with gray-brown hair, was leaning against the railing and staring down at the ground. The roof floor was carved with a large magic circle that emitted a faint purple light. But Lifa's interest lay beyond that. With his unique skill, clairvoyance, he could see through nearby places, and now, with the power of clairvoyance, he gazed beyond the roof floor and into the interior of a certain building. It was an arena divided into 4 areas. While each student was engaged in a duel, no student stood out yet. No troublemakers yet. Lifa spoke in a bored voice, like a mischievous child. A troublemaker who went around slaying demons. He had yet to see anyone who could be the slayer, but when he did, he intended to play a death game centered around that person in Ian fairy tale. The participants would be every first-year student of the magic department present at Duke Hall. The boring judges were a bonus. Soon, very soon. I'll trap all of them with my magic, and let Ian fairy tale and that troublemaker protect the people. Ah, that will be fun. Lifa giggled. The heightened anticipation was filling him with ecstasy. It was then. Kick. The roof door opened, revealing a stoic-looking man. Silver hair and blue eyes, it was Professor Fernando Frost. Lifa's eyes turned to Fernando. A demon. Fernando's eyes narrowed as he glared at Lifa cynically. Lifa grinned from ear to ear. He hadn't expected a professor to show up here. What are you doing, Professor? Aha, you were in the middle of the first year's dueling evaluation of the magic department, right? It was forbidden to enter Duke Hall. Alas, I forgot. I'm sorry, Lifa answered like a little child, but he didn't show any sign of remorse. You spoke. What surprised Fernando was that Lifa spoke like a normal human being. Demons were inherently less intelligent and were known to be unable to have normal conversations. But what happened? Didn't you only net inside of the building? Aha, I guess you extended it outside of the building this time. It was too much. Where did you hear that? Normally, when a test or a performance evaluation took place inside a building, Fernando would set up a net using telekinesis magic throughout the building. It was a kind of barrier. Therefore, if an abnormality occurred, Fernando would immediately notice it. However, only key groups within the academy were aware of that fact. The faculty, the 4 constellations, and the student council. Do you have a mole? Kohu. Lifa only laughed with his characteristic cackle, but did not respond. As if he didn't need to answer. The implication was clear. You're going to die here anyway. What are you planning? Fernando held out his right index finger toward Lifa. Water mana and ice mana flowed out in front of his finger and compressed into a small round ball and formed a bullet. Water generation, water element, 1, plus ice generation, ice element, 1, plus compression, neutral element, 4 equals elemental magic bullet, water plus ice element. Oh my, calm down, let's talk peacefully. That's quite a thing to say. The magic circle engraved on the rooftop was in the form of jumbled strokes that tangled here and there. He had memorized almost every circle. That was why Fernando had a strong feeling that this ominous and unknown magic circle was extremely dangerous. No mana was detected from it. Maybe it hadn't been activated yet. No, normally, when a magic circle was about to be activated, shouldn't some amount of magic power be felt? Ha, I didn't want to be interrupted. Still, I suppose you could be an appetizer if nothing else. With the demon's shrill voice, the purple light emitting from the magic circle became more intense. Then, a blackish yet bizarre mana spread out in an instant, swallowing Lifa and Fernando in one fell swoop. Have fun, Fernando Frost. And a circular purple space was created on the roof, fictional hell. The natural mana floating in the air was sucked in, and a new world that was disconnected from the laws of nature, the principles of this world, providence, was created. Fernando was forcibly invited into such a world. Chapter 28. Duel 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Duel 2, Lifa the Elusive, the final boss of Magic Knight of M. Raken, Act 6, Chapter 3, Fictional Hell. His current level was lower than I knew, but it was clear who he was by looking at his elements. There was no way he would appear so early. Act 6, Chapter 3 was in the second semester of the first year. It meant that fighting Lifa was still a long way off. In Magic Night of M. Raken, during the Four Constellations part of the second semester of the first year, Lifa transformed into a human and became friends with Ian Fairytale's party. He was able to disguise himself and infiltrate the academy by altering people's perception with illusion and perception-type magic. If you were a player who hadn't been spoiled, you would have thought, that's a new character, when seeing Lifa for the first time and moved on. I was like that at first too. However, as we entered Act 6, Chapter 3, it was revealed that the Lifa was a demon, and the battle to subdue Lifa began. At that time, his level was 150. I remember the difficulty level being horrendous. I don't think I've ever experienced a story twist that big before. This meant that something I didn't know about triggered Lifa's appearance. Lifa the Elusive was a demon who had been manifesting in this world for quite some time. It could be seen as one of the few demons who adapted to life in this world with its own intelligence. So, even though he was tasked with the mission of killing Ian Fairytale, a light element user, he was capable of demonstrating caution. I quickly racked my brain. The reason why he appeared early, what was it? No way. With a little thought, I was able to figure it out. He had a close relationship with Alice Carroll, the student council president of M. Raken Academy, and a shadowy figure with her own agenda who was manipulating events behind the scenes. It was a shallow alliance, since they could betray each other at any time, and would be more appropriate to define it as friendship. In the original story, it was self-evident that the man dealing with the demons was Ian Fairytale. So Alice or Lifa simply had to watch Ian's every move. Even if Ian was a member of the Fairytale family, he could still be trapped and killed at the right time. However, it was currently unknown who the demon hunter was. Alice must have been desperate to find me. It was highly likely that Lifa was also interested in the unknown entity after seeing his reaction. That was why he probably couldn't overcome his curiosity and appeared now. Since the troublemaker first appeared during the class placement evaluation for the magic department, they were likely a student in the magic department. This dual evaluation allowed him to gauge the strength of the first-year students of the magic department. It was a golden opportunity to find out who that person was. But this is too fast. The story has just entered Act 3, Chapter 1, and the final boss of Act 6, Chapter 3 had already appeared. Still, Lifa's level was only 130. There would be no problem with fighting him on point 1, but Lifa's specialty was more than just simple confrontation. It was not like Lifa's subjugation happened for nothing. The stage for fighting him was fictional hell, an 8-star magic capable of destroying an entire country, a magic that creates a world that ignored the laws of this world and transcended the concept of illusions, even though it was a type of illusion itself. It was a unique magic that no one else could copy. It didn't emit mana, but rather absorbed mana around it into its own world, so you couldn't even sense it. Just like how a black hole absorbs light and becomes invisible. Lifa was absolute inside, akin to God playing around in a world of magic that was entirely his domain. If you didn't know the strategy, even a level 180 giant like Dorothy Hart Nova would have a hard time defeating Lifa with fictional hell activated. I didn't want him to become a god. By the way, dying in that world meant losing your soul. You would become a human vegetable. The normal strategy was to not get caught in the fictional hell. What should I do? He likes to toy with humans, and in case he finds the troublemaker, he would most likely trap them at Duke Hall and suck them into fictional hell, and play a game of death. Ian would most likely struggle to keep the people safe. So what should I do now? Are you praying to the heavens? Too bad. You can't see the sky from here. Ha. Tristan laughed loudly and then cleared his throat. I lowered my head and looked at him. I was not in a position to comfortably engage in a duel here. It wasn't a comfortable situation currently, but rather a crisis. In any case, I need to get to the rooftops as soon as possible. But I couldn't just give up and run to the roof. As Professor Fernando said earlier, the waiting proctors were expected to subdue anyone who looked suspicious. Because the dual evaluation encouraged students to fight, there were times when the adrenaline rush could sometimes get the better of them. Those who acted unexpectedly were therefore reprimanded and then questioned about why they didn't follow the rules. And if that happened to me, I couldn't say how long it would take. I wouldn't be free until the duel was over, and then I would have to hear feedback from the judges. Furthermore, I cannot surrender during the first minute of the duel. I couldn't just give up and leave right away. Even if I decide to surrender, Tristan's magic would wreck me in that 1 minute. He looked like he was determined to beat me to death. And if I got beaten by Tristan, I wouldn't be able to go defeat Lifa the elusive. What if I were to challenge Lifa directly at this moment? The hunter trait would activate and I would become stronger. But, unless I wanted to be openly caught by Alice Carroll, it was probably best to refrain from such ignorant behavior in front of the other students. No matter how secretly the performance evaluation or exam is conducted, there was no stopping the word of mouth. Then the only option left is. It was the best option. I made my decision and glared straight at Tristan. The means are unlimited. No surrendering for the first minute. Now, show your opponent some respect and get ready for the duel. Ready. Begin duel. After the referee gave his instructions, he shouted and fell back. The duel with Tristan had begun. Cool. I've been waiting for this moment. This time I can ruthlessly cut off that ugly face of yours with my magic. I ignored whatever he said. Stay focused. I couldn't afford to make a mistake here. Level, mana, he was much better than me in all criteria. If we start exchanging blows, I would be screwed. Let's postpone assessing my current skills with pure magic to the next duel. For now, I should just focus on getting through this situation carefully and quickly. I wrapped ice mana around my fingers and blasted it toward Tristan. Tristan was tormented by the painful memory of his defeat during the class placement evaluation. A mere commoner with only grade E mana and no special skills. He was defeated by his poor tactics and, for some reason, by Kaya Astrian as well. Tristan gritted his teeth. Through his life, he had always been respected and held to high standards. Because he was special. Even at the prestigious M. Riken Academy, he was able to take the top rank in his class because he himself was a competent person. Therefore, it didn't make sense for someone like him to lose to a grade E commoner. Even if something went wrong, it must have been seriously wrong. This time, he would use this opportunity to right that wrong, and make it clear to Isaac that a grade E commoner like him couldn't even reach his toes. During the class placement evaluation, he had only let his guard down for a moment. D. Ice wall, ice element, for a wall of ice rose from the ground in an instant, trapping Tristan from all sides. A trick to his eyes. Tristan channeled his mana into a sharp form, carving a light green sword in the air. Wind sword, wind element, 3, sasasasasasak. The dense wind sliced through the ice wall, as easily as if it were cutting a cake, and in the blink of an eye, the ice wall, with several hatches, collapsed helplessly. When the students saw a 3-star spell slice through a 4-star, especially a defensive magic, with such ease at once, they exclaimed, as expected, as if it were only natural. Elemental firepower meant the power of magic, and it was an obvious fact that Tristan, a top-ranked honor student, far surpassed the level of Isaac, a low-ranked inferior student. Phew. As if he already knew his magic would be shattered disastrously, Isaac threw out his next move as the ice wall collapsed, processed fog. A whitish fog emanated from the magic tool, enveloping the arena. Cold divergence, ice element, 1. As the cold air released by Isaac cooled, the processed fog grew thicker and turned into advection fog. Snow pellets, ice element. 2. In the fog, the magic that Isaac had learned specifically for the duel evaluation, snow pellets, pounded the arena mercilessly, dispersing the sound. It was a spell that created a large amount of small icicles in the air and sent them crashing into the ground like hailstones. The purpose was obvious, to make sure that no one could hear where he was. Not again. Is this the only trick you can pull? Of course, since that's all I'm good for as a grade E commoner. Tristan's mouth curled into a sneer. He was starting to find that grade E commoner almost cute now. Ever since the class placement evaluation, Tristan had been working hard on his magic training. Now he was even capable enough to use defensive magic at a decent level. Hiding like a coward. Oh, so he's trying to anger me again. How shallow. You think I'm going to fall for your tactics twice? Pathetic. Tristan stretched his right arm upward, casting wind magic. A light green magic circle formed above the right hand, and the wind mana began to swirl violently. The newly created whirlwind barrier absorbed the dense fog. Wind wall, wind element, 4, Huyee. SSH. Ha. I, Tristan Humphrey, am getting stronger at every moment. The thick fog cleared, and the snow pellets were absorbed into the whirlwind. In a short period of time, as the fog cleared, the arena revealed itself, and soon, the figure of Isaac, who was running toward Tristan, was also revealed. As he ran, he put his fingers together, creating a gap between his hands to gather ice mana. What kind of athletic ability? Almost there. I got here much faster than expected. Tristan quickly tried to retreat, but his feet wouldn't move. In a fleeting moment, he glanced down and saw that the soles of his shoes were frozen. It wasn't just his shoes. The entire arena was covered in ice. Ice generation, ice element, 1, when did he? The processed fog created by Isaac was of water element. Even if his elemental firepower was insignificant, his elemental synergy, which enhanced the combination effect between elements, could not be ignored. Thus, it was possible for him to freeze the arena thick enough to trap Tristan's feet. Before long, ice mana was gently condensed in Isaac's hand. A pale blue magic circle formed, following his hand. Isaac clutched the mass of mana in his right hand and stretched it out toward Tristan. You think you're going to get away with this? He didn't know what kind of magic that was, but Tristan himself wasn't generous enough to tolerate it calmly. Today would be the day Isaac would be beaten into dust. It would be a day to unravel his own regrets. Tristan released his whirlwind barrier, wind wall, and swung his left arm, which was covered in wind mana, in one swift motion. And at the same time, the light blue mana in Isaac's grasp exploded towards Tristan. Frost explosion, ice element, 5, whirlwind, wind element, 4, Huey. Shut up, Beov. Tristan's lone scream could be heard as an explosive flood of ice attacked him. The whirlwind shattered the mass of ice that had formed in an instant, sending large shards of ice scattering into the air. However, the impact of the explosion had yet to be fully received. A strong wind pressure was generated and the impact caused Isaac's body to bounce back like a ball. However, after rolling on the floor for a while, Isaac got up without much difficulty. Phew. Tristan's spell caused no damage because it did not directly touch him. However, the wind pressure created by the collision of frost explosion and whirlwind only caused a brief pain in his abdomen. It felt as if he had been punched in the stomach with a huge fist. How? What? Did I misread that student's information? There was a look of bewilderment and confusion in the judge's eyes. A Class D student who was supposed to have grade E mana, used 5-star magic that most first-year students didn't even have access to. The judges began to sift through his information, reading the papers on their desks once more to make sure if Isaac was indeed a grade E, or if they had misremembered. The students watching the duel were also stunned, and soon started talking with faces full of disbelief. What just happened? That was 5-star magic just now, wasn't it? Isaac used 5-star magic. But he's grade E in mana, The atmosphere centered around Isaac started to become chaotic. As for Tristan, it was a very embarrassing situation for him. His school uniform was tattered as if it had been pierced by numerous thorns, and his body was covered in frostbite and bruises. At least, the whirlwind and basic protection magic seemed to have softened the impact of frost explosion. Cook-huck, he groaned and staggered in pain before straightening up again and glared at Isaac with a furious gaze. At the same time, he activated Wind Sword and smashed the ice that was binding his feet to the ground. Because of the collision with whirlwind, he trampled on the remains of the ice block that had been shattered into pieces. His anger was fully expressed with that one step. Amidst the calmly flowing cold air, he began to generate a strong wind. Wind generation, wind element, 1, as if to represent Tristan's anger, light green wind began to sweep around the arena fiercely. Then, a whirlwind began to form in his outstretched hands. A grade E commoner, wounded me again. You let your guard down again, Tristan. That was when Tristan, in a fit of rage, let his guard down and took an offensive stance. Isaac gently clenched his left hand, which was hidden behind his back, into a fist. The flow of mana in his left hand suddenly ceased. Ice generation, ice element, 1, before he knew it, a large block of ice that had formed above Tristan's head suddenly crashed down. Crash. Call. The block of ice hit Tristan squarely on the head. Amidst the screams of some startled female students, Tristan staggered and fell to his knees on the ground, a chunk of ice rolling straight to the ground. Blood trickled down from his head. The colors present on his face were a mix of his skin and red blood. Ugh. Tristan stood up, gnashing his teeth to the point of making a clicking noise. Ugh hi. His anger exploded as if it would pierce the sky. The damage he suffered this time was different from the class placement evaluation. Thanks to basic protection magic, covering his entire body, he was able to stand even after his head was directly hit by the falling ice block. He only fainted, very briefly. He shuddered and managed to get up, then stretched his right arm over his head again. A light green magic circle began to materialize in double and triple layers. Tristan had often referred to his power as dense, thick, limitless mana. The wind whipped menacingly, a swirl of mana, almighty, as he called it, that would tear through someone straight to their bones. Isaac no longer had a chance to win. He must now bear the wrath of the conceited blonde aristocrat who was covered in blood. Are you done already? Come on, it's my turn. I am definitely going to kill you, right here, right now. They say anger is a catalyst for an awakening, and Tristan, who used his anger as fuel, was unleashing a torrent of mana that could crush anyone. The students watched and gulped without even realizing it. Even though they were simply watching, they felt overwhelmed by the mana. Isaac no longer had a chance to win. From now on, Tristan's magic would hack Isaac to pieces without mercy. Yes, I surrender. That is, if the fight continues. Isaac calmly lifted his arms up and said. Exactly 1 minute had elapsed since the start of the duel, and a quick glance at the clock above the judges' heads could confirm this fact. As if he'd heard something he shouldn't have, Tristan's expression was tinged with astonishment. Because he was so surprised, his concentration broke, his wind mana dissipated, and the magic circles were dispelled. Student Isaac. Are you aware that if you surrender, you'll lose the opportunity to get feedback from us? Yes, Mr. Judge. My opponent is too strong. Even though it's a shame, I will surrender. No, you can't. Do not say that. The fight is just starting. Even though you lost, don't put on a refreshing face as if you fought well. I lost. It was a good fight. Isaac lightly patted Tristan on the shoulder with a look of, I acknowledge you, and walked away. At that moment, time stood still for Tristan. Chapter 29. L. Free. Fictional hell. You are listening at novelfull.audio. L. 3. Fictional hell. In this awkward atmosphere, I hurriedly stepped out into the hallway. The students had begun whispering about me. Things like what was the reason for that, why did I start running away, or why I didn't just do that from the beginning, that I was a coward, and so on. Even though Luce didn't care about anyone else, she was staring at me rather attentively. Was I really that noticeable? Of course, from her perspective, I was probably just a passing extra 1, maybe extra 4 at best. Well, she would stop paying attention to me soon anyways. Matteo nodded, a look of approval on his face. I didn't want to read his psychology because it was obvious that he was thinking something along the lines of, Isaac adjusted his power to Tristan's level. Now is not the time to get distracted. As soon as I got to a place where people couldn't see me, I started running. Come on. Normally, it would take me quite a while to get to the roof. Fortunately, my stamina was in good condition. I could reach the rooftop by running at full speed without stopping. Predictably, there was a high possibility that the Lifa the Elusive intended to confine the entire Duke Hall in fictional hell. He must have engraved a magic circle into the roof. So I had to get rid of his spell before it attacked the students. I sprinted up 3 stairs at a time. Still, it didn't consume much stamina. This was where all my hellish PT performances came into play. As I ran up the stairs, I took out the cloak of disguise from my magic pouch and put it on. I wore the ultramarine blue hooded cloak, put a mask over my mouth, and pulled the hood over my head. Magic cloak of disguise. Berserker. From now on, I would look like a monster. Fortunately, I arrived at the rooftop entrance door earlier than I had expected. The entrance door was wide open. The first thing I saw was a large ashen eyeball floating in the air. Second eye. It was a skill used by the Lifa the Elusive. The eyeball was fixed on the rooftop below. It seemed like Lifa's eye was watching over the arena from inside the building with clairvoyance. Even when I went up on the roof, there was no response from it. I guess it couldn't see the hallway and the stairs leading up to the roof. Otherwise, it would have seen me coming up. I was relieved. Then, just beyond the eyeball, a strange, darkish membrane stretched into the shape of a hemisphere came into view. It was a small, fictional hell, covering part of the rooftop. Why is that thing already activated? At that size, it must have been used against a small group of 1 or 2 people. Someone came to hunt Lifa. No way. Professor Fernando had disappeared during the dueling evaluation, and he hadn't returned, even after I had finished my duel. When he conducted an exam or performance evaluation inside a building, he used telekinesis magic to set up nets. It was similar to a radar. If an uninvited guest got caught in there, Professor Fernando would immediately notice. In any case, Professor Fernando had to be the person fighting Lifa in that small, fictional hell. Crazy. There shouldn't be any victims. There was also the problem of intertwined affairs, and I hated the idea of an innocent victim, not to mention the mess it would create. In particular, Professor Fernando was a very important supporting character in Magic Knight of M. Raken. As he was there to keep Alice Carroll in check. He would play a big role in awakening Ian, who was going to fall into a slump later on. I have to save him no matter what. It's like a timed attack. I have to be as quick as possible. Lifa was toying around with Professor Fernando, and once the mana contained in the magic circle was full, it would instantly increase the size of fictional hell. I'll have to hunt him before that happens. Thinking so, I jumped into fictional hell. The sea was like a mirror. The shallow sea reflected the ultramarine blue sky. It was as if the sky had been turned upside down. The sky was densely packed with stars, with the Milky Way drifting by. Every direction led to a horizon that stretched out as far as the eye could see. There were nothing but abandoned buildings scattered about. They were so shabby that they looked like they would crumble at the slightest touch. Ugh! Fresh blood was splattered across that beautiful landscape. Quong! Fernando's body ricocheted through the air like a ball and slammed into the building. Letting out a lone shriek, he was swept down to the ground. The shallow sea soaked his lower body. Ha! Ack! He coughed blood out of his mouth. His blue eyes, however, glowed with a fighting spirit. When he looked up, he saw a swarm of monsters staring back at him. They were alien beings with an appearance as though the Milky Way was flowing through their jet-black skin. They looked like they were one with the night sky, so Fernando named them night sky monsters. The night sky monsters took various forms, ranging anywhere from the forms of humans to animals, and magic beasts, and even an overwhelmingly large octopus flying in space. The octopus was so unrealistically large that it was impossible to gauge its size. However, the thing that stood out the most was the near full moon. It had to be far away, but it was so massive that it easily dwarfed the moon he was used to seeing. It was an incredibly beautiful sight to behold. So much so, that he had the ridiculous thought that it might be a good place for a grave. A grave! Fernando groaned as he got to his feet. His legs felt weak and wobbly, but he managed to stand up by holding on to the wall of a building. He remembered what he had told his associate professor. He told them that if he didn't return after 20 minutes had passed, they were to immediately stop the dueling evaluation, evacuate the students, gather their forces, and head for the rooftop. Currently, the demon was having fun toying with him. So, he had to stall for a little more time. The odds were stacked against him. He was sure that he had killed quite a few monsters, but the number had increased rather compared to before. The monsters seemed to be replicating themselves infinitely. A meaningless war of attrition. It was a structure where you were bound to lose. It was at that time. On the full moon that was rising in the night sky, there was a mouth growing. A mouth so large, that it took up half of the moon. Its jaw was too even, and the teeth were too white. Tens of thousands of eyes opened above it. It was no longer a moon, it had already become a living being. Fernando's eyes widened. The sight was so unsettling that it tingled his senses. The overwhelming sight had rendered him speechless. Tens of thousands of the full moon's ominous eyes turned toward him in unison. It started laughing. Kaya ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Kaya ha 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 ha. The grotesque laugh echoed throughout heaven and earth, as if it were the sound of all things combined. Even the night sky monsters grew mouths large enough to fill half their heads. They also burst into laughter like the moon. It was as if everything in this world was telling him to despair. Ack! Before he knew it, a muscular night sky monster had reached Fernando and threw a fist the size of his entire body. Fernando hurriedly deployed basic protection magic to soften the blow. Basic protection magic, neutral element, 1. The monster's fist struck Fernando's temple. Coo! An explosive roar rang out, shaking his brain. Fernando's body flew lightly backwards, bouncing off the surface of the sea like a skipping stone, and then rolled around in the shallow sea for a while. He made a thumping noise, and then he finally stopped moving. All of his strength left his body. Ah, Fernando blankly looked up at the sky. It's beautiful, it's really beautiful. But let's save the appreciation for next time. With all his strength, he raised his upper body. He was still surrounded by monsters, who were all aiming for his life. His muscles refused to listen. He couldn't stand up on his own two legs. It was okay. He could still fight. Fernando stretched out his right arm toward the monsters. In front of each of his 5 fingers, compressed, elemental magic bullets, were created with telekinesis magic. Water generation, water element, 1, plus ice generation, ice element, 1, plus compression, neutral element, 4 equals elemental magic bullet, water plus ice element, bang. 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 Fernando fired 5 shots of elemental magic bullet. However, none of the magic bullets hit their mark. His hands were trembling, he didn't even have the strength left to hit the enemy. He didn't have enough mana to use powerful magic like telekinesis magic, and to make matters worse, the number of monsters was increasing again. Out in space, the giant octopus stared back at him. The full moon was still giggling and mocking him. The realization that he couldn't win was agonizing. He would surely die here. Even so, he couldn't back down now. I'm a professor. To shake off this despair, he reminded himself of who he was. His voice didn't come out right, but he spoke with all his might. So for my students, I must. He became a professor, not for academic purposes, but out of a pure desire to teach aspiring wizards. For some reason, the memory of teaching magic to a young student who dreamed of becoming a wizard came to mind. He had only taught a small part of fire magic theory, but their eyes sparkled as if he had taught them so well. He didn't show it at the time, but whenever he remembered it, a smile spread across his lips. He used up his last remaining mana and fired 5 shots of elemental magic bullet, once more. It was a precarious move that looked like the elements would disperse at any moment due to lack of mana. It might have simply been a meaningless struggle. Nonetheless, he needed to stall for time, even if it was just a second more. Protect. Fernando's small, firm voice was drowned out by the demon's laughter. What a funny face, Fernando. It was fun. Goodbye. The eerie full moon bade him farewell with a patronizing voice. The night sky monsters began to mimic Fernando's technique in unison. Darkness generation, darkness element, 1, plus fire generation, fire element, 1, plus compression, neutral element, 4 equals elemental magic bullet, darkness plus fire element. Their elemental magic bullet appeared in the form of dark red flames, materializing in front of each monster's fingers, mouth, and forehead. Their sizes varied. There were monsters who made small dot-sized magic bullets like Fernando, while some made large magic bullets to match their size. Numerous, elemental magic bullet, spells were aimed at him from all directions. He was going to die this time. Bang 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 bang. The night sky monsters started shooting their elemental magic bullet, all at once, the sound of each shot blending with the next, filling the air with the sound of a machine gun firing bullets. Their elemental magic bullet sliced through the air toward Fernando. On the other hand, the elemental magic bullet he fired was futile, dispersing helplessly before even reaching the enemy. Taking one last look at the night sky monsters and the dark red flames flying towards him, Fernando closed his eyes. It was then. Ice wall, ice element, 4, cool. Frostfire, ice element, 4, way. A majestic ice wall formed in front of Fernando and a tsunami of icy cold flames poured down, engulfing the sea. His eyes widened at the sight. The elemental magic bullet that were fired by the night sky monsters couldn't even scratch the ice wall, despite their elemental advantage. As soon as the solidly rising ice wall fulfilled its role, it dispersed into powder while scattering blue light. A vast expanse of ice began to appear in Fernando's field of vision. The bodies of many of the night sky monsters were fatally frostbitten, with purple blood oozing from their scorched or torn skin. Quang! A man descended from the sky and landed on a thick sheet of ice. A crack was formed in the ice sheet. The man was releasing cold air from every inch of his body. With his arrival, the massive amount of ice that froze the sea became blue powder and scattered. In that glittering scene, the night sky monsters collapsed helplessly. Fernando caught a glimpse of the man's back. He had a rugged, muscular build with a broad back that stood out. He was at least 2 meters tall. He was wearing an ultramarine blue hooded cloak, with his hood draped over his head. Gruyuwang, from the big man came a beastly cry. It wasn't a sound that a human would make. It was the sound of a beast warning its enemy. Fernando found himself unable to speak. It was as if his brain had shut down. He knew who that monster was. It was unmistakably the suspicious being that appeared during the class placement evaluation. But why did the monster appear here? Why did the monster protect him? But before he could find the answer to those questions, Gah! The monster ferociously roared at the full moon. Meanwhile, beyond the fictional hell, Dorothy Hartnova, a schoolgirl wearing a witch's hat, skipped her class in order to admire the blue sky and ocean horizon. The symmetry of the landscape today was so appealing that she couldn't help but look at it. Dorothy floated comfortably in the sky while in a seated position as she gently let the light of her colorful stars flow. This was possible because starlight magic could manipulate natural forces, such as gravity. Is that? Then, she looked down at the academy and noticed something strange. On the roof of Duke Hall, a strange magic space had formed. It wasn't emitting any mana, so she hadn't noticed it until now. Rather, it was an unknown spell that was absorbing the mana floating in the air. It was as if that magic had been cut off from the rest of the world. Another world. It appeared to be just in an initial demonstration phase, but was rapidly expanding and would soon cover the entirety of Duke Hall. Dorothy sensed that something suspicious had happened and flew toward the spell. Chapter 30. 4. Fictional Hell. You are listening at novelfull.audio. For fictional hell, I almost had a heart attack. Of course, I knew there would be a full moon, but my heart still skipped a beat at the realization. I took a deep breath to calm myself down. I guess I'm weak against things like this. On top of that, the berserker's cry escaped my lips without me realizing it. It didn't match my voice at all, it was as if it felt my emotions and spat them out like an AI. Anyway, if I had been a second too late, it could have been an irreversible situation. Looking at Professor Fernando, he was on the verge of collapsing. He looked like he would pass out at any moment, but he was doing his best to hold on to his consciousness. Poor thing. I should probably reassure him and let him pass out in peace. Who are you? The moon's voice echoed softly. That thing doesn't look very pleasant. Look at that nice-looking set of teeth. I really want to give it a light uppercut and knock him out. This was fictional hell, and that repulsive-looking full moon was Lifa the Elusive. The creator of this world, and this was his domain. You can't tell what I'm saying anyway. Growling, I was currently unable to communicate. I was a berserker with 0 language skills. In this state, it would be difficult to communicate with words, would instead communicate with my fists. Ah, it's you. Only then did Lifa, in the form of the moon, seem to realize I was the demon hunter. Ha! Grung! Before long, the night sky monsters began to rise out of the sea. Dozens, thousands, tens of thousands of monsters, countless monsters with different shapes and sizes appeared. Cool. It was then that an earthquake occurred, and a massive arm stretched out from the ground to beyond the horizon. Wee-wee. A gigantic monster rose from the sea. It was a giant wearing a skull mask on its face, its whole body covered with the night sky where the Milky Way flowed. Seeing it from this far away, it appeared to be of a size that went beyond imagination. Even then, it was much smaller than the octopus in the sky. The troublemaker. You're the one who's been a nuisance to us demons, aren't you? Of course. You will also be dealt with soon enough. The fictional hell would soon grow in size and engulf Duke Hall. I had to defeat him before that to prevent any victims other than Professor Fernando. Ah, I wanted to meet you. I've been wondering what that crazy guy was like. Heh heh heh. I'm so happy right now. Is that so? Grr, troublemaker, troublemaker. Let me play with you. The full moon cried out, laughing like a child, as the monsters began to pounce on me, their huge mouths grotesquely laughing. Kaya ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Kaya ha 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 ha. Fictional creature, LV. Race. Demon elements. Darkness, fire danger. High psychology. Wants to bite you. If I get killed by these monsters, I would lose my mind and become a vegetable. The strength of each individual couldn't be ignored, and with an infinite number of them spawning, no matter how hard I fought, it would only be a long-term battle that I was bound to lose. I didn't know if they even gave a lot of experience points, because in the game they wouldn't give any at all to prevent abuse from easy power leveling. It was a part of Magic Knight of M. Riken, Act 6, Chapter 3, Fictional Hell, the subjugation of Lifa the Elusive. The player must protect the students by defeating the fictional creatures. That was because Lifa held a defense game against Ian and his colleagues while imprisoning the students. If even one student died, it was game over, so I remembered swearing a lot and retrying. After surviving for a certain amount of time, a story cut scene would appear. This was the scene where Ian Fairytale learned how to attack this world. The main character, Ian Fairytale, struggled with his supporters, but somehow endured with the determination to protect the students. As he swung his sword, he repeated to himself, "I can do it." Eventually, he started self-hypnosis while saying, "I am strong," or "I can be stronger." And then he became surprised by how strong he really was. That was how the full-scale subjugation against Lifa began in earnest. Yes, the fictional hell strategy is self-hypnosis. I have to be like a delusional person. It was to confront the world of illusion with delusion. If I hadn't learned this strategy, even a level 180 Dorothy Hart Nova would have no choice but to struggle. However, if one learned how to play around it, even a normal level 51 Isaac could defeat him with Hunter inactive. The key was that I had to visualize myself getting stronger. The more I know what would happen if I became stronger, the more effective it would be. If I couldn't visualize myself becoming stronger, there was no point in learning this strategy. As a veteran of Magic Knight of M. Riken, I had a clear understanding of what it was like to master the ice element. In other words, I was Lifa's natural enemy. Everything in this world was against me. Firstly, I put an ice barrier around Professor Fernando. Ice barrier, ice element, 6, let's visualize. Myself becoming a Munchkin Korean word for overpowered. For just a moment, I shut out the world, a skill I had acquired while studying when confined to my desk during my exam life, disconnecting myself from the world. I colored myself, and my own life, into nothingness. The world became silent as I redefined myself in it. I am strong. I am strong. I am the strongest in the world. Strong. The unique trait, Hunter, is activated. The level and stats are temporarily greatly enhanced. The skill tree temporarily becomes +10. The unique trait, Hunter, is activated. The level and stats are temporarily greatly enhanced. The skill tree temporarily becomes +10. The unique trait, Hunter, is activated. The level and stats are temporarily greatly enhanced. The skill tree temporarily becomes +10. It's already maxed out. The skill tree temporarily becomes +10. It's already maxed out. Status, name. Isaac LV. 200, gender. Male year. First title. Freshman mana. 9999929/999999, mana recovery speed, EX, stamina, EX, strength, EX, intelligence, C. Willpower, EX, combat skills, elemental series 1. Ice, elemental firepower, EX, elemental efficiency, EX, elemental synergy, EX, elemental series 2, locked. You have realized the full extent of the ice element, reaching the level of a sovereign. You have learned the passive skill, Ice Sovereign. Ice Sovereign, Ice Element, 9, every cell in my body felt unfamiliar. I gently lowered my head and took a brief moment to get used to this unfamiliar sensation. My skin was more saturated, and my body seemed brighter. The hair on the inside of my hood felt like it stood on its ends, and my nerves were alert. Light blue cold air flowed gently from my whole body, and I felt as if I was capable of using the most powerful magic in the world. My body, everything in me, felt so dense and heavy, but at the same time, I became light. Passive skill, Ice Sovereign. Its effects were simple and clear. It maximized the output of the ice magic I was about to use. Ha! My eyes took in the world rushing toward me. A light blue chill escaped from my breath. It's time for you to sleep. Since from now on, I'm a Super Saiyan. ****** Dorothy entered, fictional hell. It was easy to enter that magical space. It was as if she were crossing another dimension. She was swimming in the black hole like darkness, and a beautiful landscape opened up in her field of vision. An open sea that mirrored the night sky and abandoned buildings dotted the landscape. The night sky was filled with stars and the Milky Way, a giant octopus watching her from beyond the universe, rings of planets streaking across the sky, and a full moon with a mouth large enough to cover half of its body. And an army of monsters rushing at Professor Fernando and a hulking figure in an ultramarine blue hooded coat. Dorothy watched the spectacle from the sky, frozen in place. With the activation of her unique trait, All in the World, Dorothy confirmed the unknown existence hidden in the giant's essence, a near-infinite mass of mana. An overwhelming power that could swallow everything in this world. She would never forget where she had seen it. Isaac. It was Isaac, a silver blue-haired first-year student. But it was definitely not him. The hulking man was a hooded, muscular monster. A magic disguise. Dorothy got the answer. Other than a magic cloak of disguise, nothing could explain Isaac's drastic change in appearance. But why? The being in Isaac's essence was staring elsewhere, its countless eyes all bright red. As if Dorothy didn't matter. The place all those eyes were focused was the full moon. Dorothy realized that the true identity of the full moon was a demon, with the power of all in the world. Only then did she know. The unknown being in Isaac's essence was hostile to the demons. It was a very harsh life. The being in Isaac's essence began to chant. As soon as the introduction rang out, a chill ran down Dorothy's spine. This is dangerous. Dorothy channeled her mana to its maximum output, covering herself with a powerful shield of starlight. Isaac intended to use powerful magic that could destroy this world. He was so focused on casting the spell that he didn't even sense Dorothy's mana. In other words, Dorothy would have to defend herself against Isaac's magic. Fernando didn't have to defend, since Isaac had already prepared the safest means of protection, the ice barrier. Not a single thing remained by my side. Nothing had meaning in my life. In ancient times, there was someone said to have fully mastered the ice element. A woman whose name had been lost to time, and was now referred to by Ice Sovereign or, which with a scythe, had created magic with her own life. The miserable words of an arch-wizard who found no meaning in continuing to exist in this world. A chant filled with grief and resentment. At the end of her life, a calamity plunged the world into a 100-year ice age. Soon, behind the berserker-shaped Isaac, a series of light blue magic circles began to materialize in quick succession, like cogs in a wheel. Loneliness. Only you were by my side. I did not revel in the glory of endless victories alone. Fame and fortune had no meaning. Only when the owl of dusk spread its wings did I realize. The giant octopus floating in space sensed the danger and began to strike down with its feet. The air vibrated. The giant octopus, which could easily subdue an army of monsters with a single arm, fell with a violent crash. The scenery of the beautiful night sky disappeared, and the surroundings were colored with shadows. This world with only you. In the darkness, clusters of magic circles carved out the thin air at irregular intervals, even as the octopus arms descended upon the world. Behind all those magic circles, a huge magic circle drew a trajectory that seemed to touch the sky. It glowed brilliantly. Isaac stretched his right arm upward. Massive amounts of ice mana coalesced like a whirlpool and became a cold sun that cast a pale blue light. The cold sun grew larger and larger in an instant, even surpassing the sky itself. Is like hell. When the unknown monster's essence finished those words, Isaac lowered his arm. The cold sun began to fall on the hordes of monsters that began to look like ants. And it was only for a moment. Cositis, Ice Element, 9, Kwawa. Kaaweawa. The cold sun's rays pierced through the clouds. It drove away the darkness and brought blue light to the sky. In the blink of an eye, the sea froze over, and an icy cold wave raged violently, ravaging the world. A rampaging freeze of death. Cold winds and heavy snow. Numerous ice spikes rose from the ground, penetrating the already frozen monsters. A beam of light spread out in all directions, engulfing everything in its path. Snap! The night sky turned white and this world became a frozen hell, as its name suggested. Cold gusts of wind and frozen ice prevailed, transforming the land into a hellhole of extreme cold that would kill anyone who entered. The army of monsters and abandoned buildings were obliterated by the beam of light. Outside the sky, the giant octopus was frozen solid and time seemed to stand still. Dorothy and Fernando were speechless. What did I just see? It was far beyond their imagination. Dorothy's starlight shield was a wreck. Despite the distance between herself and Isaac, despite the fact that it was a shield made by using the maximum output of her mana, and despite the fact that she controlled and blocked the surrounding natural forces. It was not difficult to imagine the scene where she would have been annihilated if she ran at Isaac like a certain army of monsters and was hit by Cositis. Fernando burst into laughter as if it were absurd. The overwhelming strength of the man standing in front of him evoked a sense of emptiness rather than admiration. For whatever reason, it was a relief to know that a monster among monsters was on his side. He could no longer hold on to his consciousness. In relief, Fernando laid down and collapsed. How? Compared to others, Lifa was less affected by Cositis. He must have been watching over this world from farther away than anyone else. Even so, his full moon body was frozen in various places. Because of its gigantic form, its condition was reflected even in the eyes of Isaac and Dorothy. Then, Isaac bent his knees and kicked off the ice. Org, and started running toward the full moon. Coong. Isaac ran across the ice, his body soaring through the sky with every step. To Lifa, it was the sound of approaching death. Isaac took one step after another, and then he propelled himself like a rocket toward the full moon. Quang! Oh, no! Get away! Do not come. A deep sense of dread washed over Lifa. His survival instincts were screaming at him. He's dangerous. He's dangerous. He can't be defeated. The possibility of winning doesn't even exist. How can such a being exist in this academy? How can there be such an abnormal monster? The only one who could deal with someone like this was the evil god Nephid. Isaac conjured frost fire from both hands behind his body and propelled himself across Cocytus. The frost fire vastly increased his momentum as he traveled across the frozen sea. The speed was incredible. He couldn't follow Isaac's movement with his eyes. Do not come. As soon as the distance closed a little, Isaac's magic would be able to reach Lifa. Lifa screamed in terror and released fictional hell. He wanted to escape as quickly as possible. Clink, Kararara, the world shattered into pieces like a broken pane of glass. In an instant, light engulfed everything, fictional hell was released, and bizarre purple mana dispersed into the air. All those who were inside returned to the outside world. The familiar and ordinary scenery of Duke Hall's rooftop was reflected in their eyes. Roar. As soon as fictional hell was released, a wall of black flame rose up and split the center of the rooftop. Flame wall, fire element, 4, plus black flame, fire element, 5, equals black flame wall, fire element, ah. Ah. In the meantime, Lifa tried to quickly run away. Ice wall, ice element, 4, Durr. Walls of ice rose from all sides, creating a ceiling and blocking any means of escape. And then. Snap, gotcha. Isaac's hand cut through the flames and grabbed Lifa's head. Before he knew it, his mask was off and his hood was down, and Isaac had regained his original appearance and voice. Ice generation, ice element, 1, the ice lightly created by Isaac ignored its elemental disadvantage and extinguished the flames. Die. Die. Lifa trembled and examined the overwhelming monster with his second eye. Ha! For a moment, Lifa doubted his own eyes. Wavy silver hair with a bluish tint, and cold red eyes. The weakest of M. Riken Academy's freshmen in the magic department, with a grade E in mana. He was a candidate who could not even be considered a hindrance, more than anyone else. Because of that, he didn't even watch his duel. Grade E. How could you? His mind started to jumble with confusion. Lifa couldn't understand this situation at all. Isaac, without answering, began condensing ice mana into his other hand and a magic circle of frost explosion materialized in front of him. Lifa was startled. Save me. Spare me, please. A pitiful voice. However, Lifa's desperate cry only echoed helplessly in the small space made by ice wall. Footnotes.